After 15 years of Liberal government, but she is fighting a strong desire for change that she may not be able to overcome. Duc Ford, the newly minted leader of the Progressive Conservatives. Many thought this was his election to lose. Now the race is tight and losing suddenly a real possibility. What does Ford have to do to convince voters he's the man for the job tonight? And Andrea Horvath, it's her third time leading the NDP to Election Day. She may not have expected her party to be riding this high in the polls and have the momentum. Can she hold on until Election Day? Hey everybody, I'm Rosemary Barton. Thanks for joining us for this special coverage right here on CBC News Network. The debate begins in about half an hour. We'll bring you some analysis leading up to it, and once it's over, a little bit more to help you make sense of what you just heard and whether it changes anything. We have reporters who have been dedicated to the campaign trail joining us tonight on the ground. CBC Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley in the media room. Last time we worked together, the endless marathon progressive conservative leadership. That will not happen tonight. It will not be 8 hours of TV together tonight, Mike. Good to see you. Megan Fitzpatrick outside the broadcast center where there are crowds of supporters and some protesters, including the Green Party. We'll hear more from Megan about that in just a minute. And we've assembled the best political panel this side of At Issue. Chantal and Andrew make me say that. NDP strategist Brad Living is in Toronto. Conservative strategist Chad Rogers in Toronto as well. Liberal strategist Rob Silver here in Ottawa. And also in Ottawa, our very own Eric Grenier, who's been tracking this as he does. Okay, that's enough of me talking, because who wants to hear that? Let's get some opening thoughts from everybody here on the panel. Mike, let's start with you in the media room, because you've been reporting on this from the very beginning. What do you think each leader is focused on tonight? What were they telling each other? What were their war room telling each other tonight about what they need to do?
So Andrea Horvath is going to have a target on her back during this debate. They are very aware of this. So her goal is really to try to basically show that she can handle the pressure, to kind of be calm and unflappable when she is having both Duc Ford and Kathleen Wynne coming at her. Duc Ford, his real goal here is he's got to stop the bleeding in the polls. The PCs have been on this downward trend, according to the CBC's poll tracker, for a couple of weeks now, and what seemed to be a big lead has been frittered away. So Duc Ford's going to need to reach out to his core voters, but also those people who perhaps had some concerns about Duc Ford, and show them that he is ready to be the premier. Kathleen Wynne, look, she doesn't really have anything to lose in this debate, because she's the scrappy underdog now potentially. So it would be interesting to kind of see whether is that gonna free her up a little bit to kind of, I don't know, go for it a little bit more and loosen up.
Okay, do we know anything about how they've prepared? I don't think we've seen Duc Ford out on the campaign trail for a couple of days now, so clearly he's been working.
Yeah, in fact, I spoke to some of his people just this afternoon, a couple of hours ago, and he was in prep, actually, just after 4 o'clock. His plan really is to definitely go after the NDP. In the words of some of his communications people, they want to hold the NDP to account for their tax promises, and to make sure that people are aware of issues with some of the NDP candidates. Interestingly, Andrea Horvath, her preparation has involved a lot of sitting around talking, as opposed to the mock debates, trying to figure out how they want to approach it. And their desire is, don't fix what ain't broke, because they felt she came across quite well in the first and second debates. So why not stick with the same plan this time? Okay.
Thank you, Mike. We'll check back with you in a little bit. Let's get some opening thoughts, though, from our panel. I'm going to start with Eric, if I can. Eric, just because Mike alluded to the polls, and for people who maybe haven't been following so closely, just give us a sense of where we sit now and how quickly the Progressive Conservative Party seems to be slipping down.
Well, it is a big change in this campaign, because when it started, the PCs were well ahead of both the New Democrats and the Liberals. The Liberals and the NDP at that point were tied in that second spot, well behind, and the PCs were on track for majority government. But now what we're seeing is that the PCs and the NDP are more or less tied. We've seen some polls that have been out in the last few days. Some have put the NDP narrowly ahead, others have put the PCs narrowly ahead. But what we have largely seen is that the movement has been towards the New Democrats, dropping both the PCs and the Liberals, with the Liberals dropping to a support level which would be at a historic low for the party. What the challenge is for the New Democrats is to see if they can actually continue this momentum, because if it's a tie situation between the NDP and the PCs might be able to get more seats out of that because of how their vote is distributed. So for the New Democrats, it's to make sure that they haven't already hit their ceiling and that they can keep chipping away from the PCs.
Okay, I'm going to start with, go next to Rob if I can, because Mike didn't get to what Kathleen Wynne did to prepare today. I know she went for a run, which is sort of par for the course for her, something she does, I guess, to relax and get ready. What do you think she has to do tonight, though, Rob? Is there any way to make up what we're seeing, I guess, in the polls, or for her to gain some support back or do anything to improve her fortunes a bit?
Well, you need to start by getting Liberals back, people who have voted Liberal provincially in the past, people who vote federally, who right now, according to the polls at least, are not supporting the Liberal Party. So you need to attract them. You need to give them a reason to come back. You also need to point out, and if I were her, I would do this quite explicitly in this debate, that this is a historic debate for the reason it's the first debate in Ontario history where an NDP leader is going in as the frontrunner. And I think Andrea Horvath is, in many ways, the frontrunner right now because of that momentum and because of where it sure feels like the race is going. And I would call out quite explicitly, if I were Kathleen Wynne, some of you are supporting Andrea Horvath because you're mad at me. I get that and I accept that. And here are the reasons why you should still consider supporting me. Party are supporting her to stop Duc Ford, and you don't need to do that anymore. You can come back to us. Duc Ford stopping Duc Ford. I'd make that kind of an explicit appeal to try to bring back some Liberals and win some seats and hopefully get some momentum going into the last week if you're Kathleen Wynne.
Although that's a pretty surprising place to be at this stage, I guess, for the Liberals. Maybe I'll go to Brad for this. I mean, I hear people talking inside the Liberal Party about how to save the furniture. Like, how do we make sure we have 8 seats, which is official party status at Queen's Park? I mean, it's one thing to lose. It's another thing to think, oh gosh, we just want to have, enough so that we can have resources and staff. So what do you expect Andrea Horvath to do to sort of counter what Rob is talking about there?
Well, I think for Andrea Horvath, again, coming in with the momentum that everyone, I think, is universally accepting. The poll numbers are good. What we're starting to see now is that vote that she is gaining is beginning to lock in for Andrea. That is, they're no longer shopping around, that they've made the decision that they are going to be voting for Andrea. Those are all good signs. But for tonight, she has to continue to do what she's done so well on the campaign trail. That is, talk about the issues that people care about, connecting with people on what they want out of this election campaign. They want to end hallway medicine. They want more affordable prescription drugs. They want more affordable childcare. These are all the things that have gotten her to this place. So for tonight, she needs to continue to do that. She will have a target on her back. Duc Ford has 90 minutes to tell us what his platform is. He still hasn't had his platform. So she's got a lot of good ammunition against those two opponents to push back with the inevitable attacks that are going to be against her tonight.
Okay, Chad, I only have 30 seconds, but I'll start with you when we come back from the break. So in 30 seconds, what do you think Duc Ford will do?
Well, Duc Ford's done an amazing thing. He's a guy who's brand new to this. He's debating 2 people who have done this a couple of times already, and he's made himself the underdog as the front runner going into the end of a campaign. Andrea Horvath is going to be on trial tonight as an untested leader with an untested team, and he's going to have to demonstrate he can stand up with a team and be premier right away, and that she can't. Kathleen Wynne tonight is a corporate time waster. Every minute she's talking takes away from the real competition because voters have disqualified her from this race already.
Okay, I can see Rob has much to say just by the look on his face, but I'm going to put you all on pause for a moment and we'll come right back. While people take their seats in the CBC atrium, you can settle in at home too. We're going to take a short break and dissect more of what we can expect tonight and whether this could change something because polls matter, campaigns matter, debates tend to matter as well. Special coverage, the Ontario Leaders Debate on CBC News Network, back after this. Welcome back to special coverage of the Ontario Leaders Debate right here on CBC News Network. As you can see, that's the CBC Atrium. Debate beginning in about 15 minutes or so, and it will last 90 minutes, an hour and a half. Megan Fitzpatrick, though, is just outside the CBC Broadcast Centre where crowds have started to form. And they're going to start yelling, I'm guessing, as soon as she begins to talk. Tell us who's out there, Megan, and why they're out there.
Quite likely. It was a very boisterous crowd a bit earlier too, Rosie, as all the leaders were making their way into the building. Now they've moved over to this side of the building. Obviously, signs on full display. I had a chance to talk to some of the party supporters earlier, and what some of the Liberals were telling me was that they know that Kathleen Wynne's coming into this debate kind of as the underdog. Her party is trailing way behind in the polls, but a lot of them are party loyalists. They say the Kathleen Wynne that they know likes a challenge and that she rises to the challenge. They know her as a tough campaigner and a good debater. So they were expressing a lot of still optimism and faith in their leader and confidence. So they have not given up hope, they were telling me, that she can still win this thing. But one Liberal supporter told me really the pressure is on Andrea Horvath tonight, given her rise in the polls and that some of those polls are showing her neck and neck with PC party leader Duc Ford, that she will be the target tonight. They know that, but they're also telling me that they think she can handle it. They like how she's performed in the first two debates, and they're expecting her to perform well again tonight, get her message across, get her platform across. Same thing with the Ford supporters. They were here earlier excited and saying that they feel good about their platform, the promises that Duc Ford is making, and that they want Duc Ford to just be Duc Ford. And of course, we've got Green Party supporters here as well who are expressing their displeasure with the fact that their leader, Mike Schreiner, is not participating in the debate. The organizers only invited party leaders whose parties have seats in the Ontario legislature. So they're here expressing their displeasure. Mike Schreiner will be participating in the debate in an online forum, answering the questions alongside the other leaders on Twitter. I just want to mention quickly, there's also about a dozen or so women dressed up as the characters from Handmaid's Tale who are targeting Duc Ford, saying that he would not respect a woman's right to choose. So quite a mix of people out here, but of course, party loyalists and supporters from all of the parties here, excited to get this debate underway.
Okay, well, just all those people made me more excited than I was. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate it. We'll check back with you a bit later. All right, let's get back to our panel here and see where we're at. Eric Grenier, Megan talked about one, I guess, very optimistic Liberal supporter who thought Kathleen Wynne could still win this election. Of course, everything is possible, but is there actually a path to victory for her, given the way the polls have been tracking over the past number of weeks and months?
Well, it would be a big challenge for the Liberals, to say the least, to be able to overcome. Well, they'd have to make up about 2 points a day for the next 10 days, which would be a challenging thing to do. We've seen lots of polling that shows that the Liberals have the least amount of voters that are accessible that would even consider voting for the party. And when you're seeing some polls showing that the amount of people who say they want to change the government being as high as 84%, that doesn't leave a lot of room for the Liberals. So it will be a challenge for them. So I think instead what the end of this campaign is about for them is to make sure that they have a respectable showing, that they can maybe force a minority government where they might have more of an influence. So for them, I think that this campaign becomes less of a province-wide campaign and more of a much more regionally focused one where they can try to get some of their more popular local MPPs re-elected rather than trying to get the government re-elected at this stage.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Duc Ford, and everybody can have a go at this. I wondered this on At Issue last week. I continue to wonder it, whether or not Duc Ford has been almost too tightly boxed in. I think there was a lot of concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he would go out there and say things and sort of be all over the place. I'm not sure that's happened, but I wonder if that hasn't happened to his detriment in some ways, because I don't think anyone would say that this has been the most fantastic campaign for them. Chad, why don't you start?
Well, look, Duc Ford is the outsider in this race. He's the guy 90 days ago who wasn't a politician in Ontario and through a bizarre set of circumstances became not only a front-runner to be premier, he had to learn how to be a party leader and how to run a provincial campaign with everyone watching him. He has tried to look like a premier. As a front-runner. He's tried to tell people, look, I'm an entertaining outsider guy who sees things differently and is willing to take on the establishment, but I'm also willing to button down and prove that I can come to a podium and represent the province appropriately. So I think he's had two challenges. The the real dimension for the Conservative strategists is that an atypical, a once-in-a-century Liberal collapse has changed the entire race. A two-party race between the Conservatives and the NDP is new for Ontario. It's going to cause upsets in seats that no one predicted at the start of this race. So he's had to stand there and say, look, I've recruited candidates. I have senior people like Caroline Mulroney and Rod Phillips and others ready to form a cabinet, versus Andrea Horvath, who has a plan full of mistakes, candidates with goofy stuff that she won't renounce, who's not ready, who wins by default simply by being a little more likable as the Liberal vote, the floor comes out of the Liberal vote and cedes to the NDP unchallenged. So tonight, it's not Duc Ford on trial as it was the previous debate, it's Andrea Horvath.
What you don't know at home is that Brad and Chad are actually sitting at the same desk. And so if you at one point see one person lunge over the box, that's what's happened. They're seated
just
very close
outside
to
of reach.
We really like each other, though,
I know you do. I noticed that Chad, though, Brad failed to mention that over the weekend, Duc Ford decided that he would offer a $1 beer to Ontarians.
It's a great idea.
Maybe. It seemed like there's some public health issues there, but okay, go ahead, Brad.
But the biggest problem with Chad's point is that Duc Ford has not behaved like somebody who's running for premier. We have under 2 weeks to go, and he still hasn't released a platform. He has promised to cut $6 billion from the provincial budget, and he has not told Ontarians what he's going to be cutting. That is thousands of nurses, thousands of teachers, hundreds of hospitals, hundreds of schools. Which are they? He's got 90 minutes tonight. Basically, his last chance tonight is to tell Ontarians what precisely he's going to be cutting, because we have the right to know. To say nothing of the fact that he's not shown leadership on the 407 identity theft scandal. He has not shown leadership when it comes to questionable candidates like Andrew Lawton in London, Ontario. These are some big mistakes that Mr. Ford has made, and without a platform, you can't say I'm applying for the job of premier, but I don't have a resume. I didn't do any of my homework. But just trust me, I'm not Kathleen Wynne. That is not responsible. In fact, what's interesting about Andrea Horvath, she's not only drawing those disappointed Liberals, she's also drawing from traditional progressive Conservatives. Mr. Ford's numbers have come down dramatically, and Ms. Horvath is picking those up because she's talking about the issues that people care about, and she has a plan. Mr. Ford doesn't.
Okay, I will want to fact check that with Eric in a minute, but I'll let Rob weigh in on Duc Ford and how he's handled the campaign so far and what tonight's debate might mean for him.
I enjoy Chad's description of Duc Ford as if he's an unfrozen caveman politician who just emerged from a deep freeze 3 months ago to decide to run for office. First off, he'd been running for mayor of Toronto, he said, for the last 3 years, and he's I don't know how that's an argument in favor of Duc Ford, that he's the outsider who just emerged and he doesn't know about your political platforms or political communications. They have run a kind of disastrous campaign. It's been in large part because of the Liberal War Room. Brad's colleague Bob Lipinski, who's running the Liberal War Room, has consistently knocked Duc Ford off message, and part of the there was it was a target-rich environment, the Conservative campaign, the Conservative leader, the Conservative set of candidates. Part two, they didn't have a very strong message. They didn't have a very consistent message other than change, folks, change, folks, change, folks, taxes are bad. So because they didn't have a lot of substance to pivot back to, they've allowed themselves to get knocked off message to the NDP's benefit. There is an argument that the Liberal War Room has put Andrea Horvath in a lot of ways exactly where she is right now because of the damage that they've done to Duc Ford. So no, he's not a great candidate, and the problem is he may be quickly getting to a point where his ceiling of vote is well below 40%, and if the Liberal vote goes down, that's tricky to win.
Okay, I'm going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and fact check two of those things: whether Andrea Horvath can actually take progressive Conservative supporters, because that seems odd to me, and then what the floor ceiling is here for people. So Eric, I'll come back to you after this short break. One last one before the debate begins: special coverage of the Ontario Leaders Debate right here on CBC News Network. There we are at the CBC Atrium in Toronto, waiting for the third and final leaders' debate, just days now before the Ontario election. And it's going to be an interesting one, and it could change people's minds. Eric, let's just tackle a couple things that the gentleman said before the break, and we only have a very short period of time. But is there a path here for the NDP to steal support from the Progressive Conservatives? What is the floor or ceiling for Duc Ford? Is there one? And where else could Kathleen Wynne, I guess, pick up some support in this last week or so?
Well, the New Democrats have been picking up some support from the PCs, whether they are people who are traditionally PC or were just parking their vote with the PCs looking for a change of government. That's harder to say. But they are starting to get some from the PCs, which was not the case at the beginning of the campaign, that the most of the NDP gains were coming at the expense of the Liberals. Now, for the Conservatives, what would their floor be? Well, you'd probably look at the performances of Tim Hudak over the last two elections, so 31, 35%, something like that. We're starting to see some polls showing that the PCs could be that low. And for the Liberals, if they can make the case that the New Democrats aren't ready for government, then maybe they might be able to get some of the voters that they lost, but they might also be able to get some of the people who have voted for the Liberals in recent campaigns and are now saying they would vote for the PCs. That might be one place where they could still get a little bit of more support as this campaign reaches its final days.
Rob, is there anything that a leader can do in the face of a desire for change? Is it possible to pull it back, or is that just overwhelmingly difficult to fight against?
It's tough, especially when you've been in power for 15 years. Look, the voters are never wrong. What you need to be able to do is show that you as a government, you as a political party, are also change, that you're an activist government, that you're not a tired government. I think that's what the Liberals at Queen's Park have tried to do. They have been an extraordinarily activist government. Whether it's enough to convince voters that they represent change or that it's not time for change is a bit of rolling a boulder uphill. I'm not going to lie to you about that, Rosie. Why would I come out on TV and lie to you right now?
Yeah, that's well, good. I appreciate that. There's a hard road ahead, and I think they understand that, Chad. But there is, to your point, I think challenges though for Duc Ford too. There are questions around problems with votes and showing that he is capable of being a premier, which is different than what he's been lately. We may have to end here in 30 seconds, so 10 seconds to you, Chad.
Duc Ford's got to show tonight that he's got a real plan. His voters are the most enthusiastic of any of the three parties, and he's got to get them to the polls on June 7th, show real value for how gas prices and taxes and other meaningful things are going to benefit folks if he's elected.
Well, that's what someone, and I'll give you 10 seconds too, Brad. Someone suggested to me that the voter machinery around the NDP may not be as strong as the Conservatives in terms of getting out the vote. Is there any truth to that from your perspective?
No, I wouldn't concern myself with that. If these trend lines continue that you were just showing on the graph, I mean, what the riding polls that are in the public domain are showing us right now is that the Liberals are losing almost everywhere in this province. We're debating over traditional seats. Those will go NDP.
I got to let you go. Sorry. Brad, Chad, Rob, and Eric will be back after the debate. The debate lasts 90 minutes until 8 p.m. No commercial breaks. We'll be back on the other side of it with more special coverage. You're watching CBC News Network.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Paikin, and welcome to the 2018 Ontario Election Leaders Debate.
Good evening. I'm Farah Nasser. Steve and I will be your moderators today. And we should tell you that all the parties have agreed to the format, they've all agreed to the rules, and the speaking order has been decided by a draw.
And with that, let's introduce the leaders to you. They are Kathleen Wynne, the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, the Progressive Conservative Party leader, Duc Ford, and the New Democratic Party leader, Andrea Horvath.
We are going to begin tonight with opening statements. Duc Ford, please start us off.
Well, thank you very much for having us. My friends, you know me. I'm for the little guy. I'm for the people. I'm here to tell you the PC plan, a plan to clean up the hydro mess and reduce your hydro rates by 12%, a plan to put money back into your pocket instead of the government's pocket by reducing your income tax by 20%, making sure that we reduce gasoline tax by 10 cents a liter. My plan is to create great paying jobs and nobody will be laid off. Our plan is to reduce and get rid of hallway healthcare. My plan is to bring honesty, integrity, and transparency back to the government. You don't have to choose between bad when it comes to the Liberals or 10 times worse when it comes to the NDP. Our government is for the people, and a new day will dawn in Ontario, a day of opportunity, prosperity,
Thank you,
and
Mr.
growth.
Ford. That is your time. I will turn it over to Ms. Horvath next. Ms. Horvath.
There's something special happening in Ontario, and everywhere I go, I can feel it. People are saying that things are going to change and that they want to see something different for the future. People are saying that they don't want to see the same old solutions from government. They know that we can have change that makes people's lives better. We don't have to accept what's been happening. We don't have to go from bad to worse. We can end hallway medicine in our province. We can make sure that every child has the education that they need. We can do so much better, and we can do that together. You know what? It doesn't have to be the way it is in this province. And I know that together we can make change that makes people's lives better. I'm confident that we can do that together on June 7th. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Horvath. Once again, audience, I'd ask that you restrain your reactions. We're trying to get this moving and for people to get the most out of this debate, so I will ask you please to refrain from your applause. Ms. Wynne, you're next.
Thank you very much. Government isn't about winning power. It's about using the power that you're given to make a lasting difference in people's lives. And my opponents love to talk about my record, and so do I. So here's what I want to say about the last 5 years. Sorry, not sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry that more people don't like me. But I am not sorry about all of the things that we're doing in Ontario to make life better. I'm not sorry that we're covering tuition for 235,000 students. I'm not sorry that we're protecting the environment. And I'm really not sorry that we're no longer asking single moms to raise a family on $11.40 an hour. We've created nearly 1 million jobs, and we've got a plan for better hospital care, better home care, and better child care that builds on that success. I'm not sorry that we're making an economy that works for everyone, not just for a few.
Thank you, Kathleen Wynne, for the opening statement. Okay. Okay, everybody. We let everybody get away with applause for the opening statements, but let's really focus now on the debate. We're breaking this up into 3 segments this evening, doing something a little bit different. For the first segment, which we're about to go into now, Farah and I are going to ask a few questions. These questions have been chosen by a panel of journalists, the broadcasters producing this debate, and the first question is about trust. And Duc Ford, you get the chance to answer this question first. Trust in politicians, as we all know these days, is rather low. Why should voters trust you?
Well, let me tell you, Steve, and I'm going to tell the people at home, every day I have to make decisions for a couple hundred families at our company. And every decision I make, I have to make sure it's the right decision. I have to make the right decision when we're elected on June the 7th for 14 million people, and I take that seriously. I also have a proven track record. When I say I'm going to do something, we've done it. Under the City of Toronto, we saved the taxpayers over $1.16 billion, and not one single person lost their job. And under our government, I'm going to reinforce this, not one single person will lose their job. What I say I'm going to do, we're going to do. I'm the only one with a proven track record of governing and saving the taxpayers' money and keeping promises, not breaking promises, not saying one thing and doing something else. That's what I promised the people, and I will turn this province around, and we will have this province moving like you've never seen before. We'll see economic growth. We'll see new jobs being created. The likes this province has never seen. Prosperity to the people, prosperity to companies. We're going to need more people. We're going to need to hire more nurses, more teachers when the economy is going. My friends,
Okay, Mr. Ford,
we will
that's
have this
time.
economy booming.
Thank you, Mr.
booming
Ford.
in
Kathleen
Ontario.
Wynne, you have the next opportunity to respond.
So 4 years ago, I promised the people of Ontario that I would build this province up. And that's exactly what we've been doing. We've created nearly 1 million jobs. We've built roads and bridges and transit all over this province. We've got the lowest unemployment rate in nearly 20 years. And the economy is growing and outstripping the growth of other parts of Canada and the United States. So what we are seeing in Ontario is prosperity that is drawing business, that is allowing businesses to expand. And at the same time, we've got 235,000 students whose tuition is being covered. We've got children whose prescription medication is being covered. So what we've done is build the province up in a way that deals with infrastructure deficits that had been left by previous governments, and at the same time, we're making our economy fairer for everyone, not just for a few people, but for everyone in this province. Everyone who needs free tuition, everyone who needs prescription medication, for families who need more home care. All of that is happening at the same time that the economy is growing. And our plan that we're putting forward would build on that. So I did what I said I was going to do, and we know that we can continue to foster economic growth in the province.
Andrew Horvath.
Thanks, Steve. You know, it's frustrating, I think, for a lot of people as they watch governments make promises that life's going to get better, only to see that after 25 years of Liberal and Conservative governments, life just keeps getting harder for families. And when people say, when politicians say, well, we're going to make it better and you can trust us, we make all these promises, it makes people cynical about politics. And one of the things that I find very, very worrisome is that's what turns people off of voting. And it makes people think that you can't have change. That no matter who gets elected, and I don't know if you folks have heard it, but I've heard it many times, no matter who gets elected, it's all going to be the same. And I think that this is an election where we can actually make change for the better, where we can say we don't have to go back to Liberal and Conservative governments. We can have a government that puts people at the heart of every decision, so that it's not about getting a bump in the polls, and it's not about slogans and bumper stickers. It's about people and families each and every time. That's what New Democrats have fought for. That's what I fought for as leader for 9 years in the legislature, proudly, and prior to that, when I was a city councillor, and as well when I was an MPP. And all I can say is this: I believe that we can make this province a place where everyone can build a good life, and I'm asking that folks have some trust in that for a change.
The rules now provide for open debate among the three of you, and Mr. Ford, you get the first comment.
Well, trust comes down to who do you trust with your money? Do you trust an NDP government that says they have a budget and then mysteriously they made a mistake of $7 billion on their own budget and their own plan? So their plan's out the window.
Mr. Ford, not true.
Their plan is actually out the window. It made a $7 billion mistake. So the NDP can't do math, obviously,
so
and the Liberals are cooking the books.
Mr. Ford, in
There's
fact,
one person that they can trust with their money that has a proven,
Okay, stand by.
proven record.
Mr. Ford, take 10 seconds to finish your point, then we'll hear Andrew Horvath.
And then I'd like...
And then Ms. Wynne.
There's one person who has a proven record of saving the taxpayers' money. We don't make mistakes in our budget. We don't make $7 billion mistakes.
Do you have a plan?
We don't cook the books to $12 billion.
Okay, let's hear Andrew Horvath's response.
We make sure we keep our promises.
Let's give Andrew a chance to respond. Andrew Horvath.
So we did admit that there was a mistake, and we fixed it right away. It's nowhere near what Mr. Ford's talking about, but there you go. Inflating of numbers when we haven't even seen any numbers from Mr. Ford. People started voting yesterday, Mr. Ford. Where is your platform? Where is your respect for the people now when they're already at the polls and you haven't provided them any information about what it is that you plan to do in our province? What are you going to cut?
Kathleen
What
Wynne's
is going to
turn.
suffer from
Kathleen
Mr.
Wynne,
Ford's
please.
cuts?
Yeah, and I think, Doug, nobody has any idea what those 10, 12, 14, we don't even know what the number is, $1 billion worth of cuts would mean to the people of this province. What we do know is that education and healthcare would be hurt. There is absolutely no way that you can take billions of dollars out of the services that are provided in this province and not hurt education and healthcare. And I'm only standing here tonight because I got involved in provincial politics because of what Mike Harris was doing in this province, cutting across government, which is exactly what, Doug, you have proposed. And I would just say to you, Andrea, that, you know, to suggest that somehow the economy is not growing in Ontario and people are not finding a life that they can be proud of is just not the case. Of course we can do better. Of course that there's more that we can do. But to suggest that there hasn't been improvement since Mike Harris was the Premier is just not the case.
But Kathleen, the question was about trust. And I was in the legislature the day that you said straight to my face that you had no intention of selling off Hydro One. And then what did you do? A couple of months later, you started selling off Hydro One. That goes straight to trust, Kathleen.
I'm going to have to stop the discussion now because we're on to our next question from journalists. And our next question, it's about affordability. And Ms. Wynne, you're going to have the first chance to respond to this question. We've heard a lot of people complain that life in Ontario isn't as affordable as they would like. What specific policy changes are you offering to address this? Once again, Ms. Wynne, you can start us off.
Thanks very much. And I think that we all know that as our economy changes, as our society changes, as our society ages, people are confronting costs that they might not have before. And we recognize that. And so this is not a matter of what are we going to do going forward. We are already putting in place supports. That's what covering the cost of tuition for low and middle income families is about. That's what free prescription medication for children from their birth till their 25th birthday is about, and seniors next year. We recognize that we need to make sure that there are supports that are put in place so that people can have that extra amount of money in their pocket. We know that there's a need for support for dental and support for pharma for the rest of the population. That's what our plan is about. Parents who are looking for childcare need to know that that's going to be available. You know, go to any playground at any school in Ontario and you'll meet young moms and dads who need to find childcare. So our plan is about building on the full-day kindergarten that we've already put in place and putting in place free preschool childcare. All of those things are about helping people with the affordability of their lives. But what we're not going to do is cut taxes so that we can't actually deliver the services that people need. And that's exactly what Duc Ford would do.
Ms. Horvath, your turn.
Thanks very much for the question. You know, it reminds me of a woman that I met just very recently in Scarborough when we were doing a childcare announcement about making sure that childcare is available at $12 a day for families. And she approached our bus. She wasn't part of our press conference. She approached our bus and waited for me to come out to say hello. She's a woman that was in her late 30s, 3 kids. And she said to me, Andrea, I did everything that I was supposed to do. She said, I went to school, I got my degree. At first, I didn't get a job in my field, but I did eventually. She said, I'm a single mom now with 3 kids, and I've done everything that I was supposed to do, but I have to go to a food bank to feed my children every week. She said, I can't pay the rent, I can't pay my hydro bill, I don't have a plan for my kids in terms of dental benefits. This is exactly what our plan is all about. It's to help folks have a more affordable life so that they can have hope for the future. No mom should have to take her kids to a food bank or feed her kids through a food bank if she's working full-time and doing the best she can. The cost of housing is too unaffordable. The cost of childcare is too unaffordable. Years and years of Liberal government, and things have gotten harder for families and not better. And that's why our plan not only deals with prescription drugs and dental and childcare, but it recognizes that these are the things that families need to build a good life here.
Mr. Ford, your response, please.
Well, you think it's unaffordable now under the Liberals, and it's bad, but it's going to get 10 times worse under the NDP. We've seen this show before. We've seen when the NDP were in power that 125,000 people lost their jobs. Unemployment skyrocketed 28%. Welfare rates went up. We had the highest taxes in North America. My friends, I'm going to reduce your personal income tax by 20%. I'm going to reduce the gas price per liter by 10 cents a liter. I'm going to reduce your hydro rates by 12%. That is true savings. My friends here to the right, the NDP, And the Liberals, they believe in one thing: big government, tax, 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 spend, spend, spend. The people that are most vulnerable are the low-income people that get hurt. When they put the carbon tax jacks up the gas price, the worst tax ever, jacks up the gas prices, but jacks up every single item you buy in the store, and it does nothing for the environment. They believe in high taxes. I believe in empowering the people, not empowering the government. The people can spend their money a lot wiser than the government can. That's the difference between the NDP, the Liberals, and the PCs.
Okay, Mr. Ford, thank you very much for that. Ms. Wynne, will you please begin this period of open debate?
Yeah, so, you know, Doug, if you believe that people need to have more money in their pockets, it's interesting that you don't support raising the minimum wage, because the minimum wage is making a huge difference to people across this province, and we've committed to increasing it to $15 an hour next year. You don't support that. And Andrea, you know, the child care plan, and you know, the fact is that we share a lot of the same values, but your plan won't work. That's the problem with it. Your child care plan will actually create long wait lists.
Your plan has people paying $2,000 a month for child care in Toronto. That's what your plan has done. You've been in office for 15 years. The problems that families are facing, the struggles they're having, is because you haven't been paying attention to everyday folks and what they need
Andrea,
to build a good life in our province.
kindergarten.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Full
Ford,
day kindergarten.
$18 a year in tax breaks.
Let's let Mr. Ford have a say.
Life more affordable.
Your plan would annihilate the middle class. Your plan would bankrupt this province. You know it. You're spending
wrong, Mr.
30, 40, 50
You-
billion
your
dollars.
plan-
Where
plan
is your
gives-
money coming
you know,
from?
Mr. Ford, you talk
Your
about being
plan is
for
coming
the
from the
people.
middle class.
You talk about being for
About
the people,
reducing taxes.
but your
That's what
plan
our plan
is for the rich. Your plan's going to give
our plan's for the little guy.
$1,200 to the rich,
You know,
and $18 to everyday
the
families.
NDP talk a
You
good
can't even
game.
Ms.
get a
Horvath,
club pack
let's
of
let him
chicken
respond.
for
My
18
words,
bucks.
Let's let him respond, Ms. Horvath.
So,
My friends, do me a favor, the people listening at home. Go to your employer on Monday.
You're not being honest,
Go to
Mr.
your
Ford.
employer on Monday and ask them one question from Duc Ford. What would happen to my job? God forbid the NDP ever got in. I know the answer. They'd be gone because
And then-
125,000 jobs are
And
lost.
then
Mr. Ford, let Ms. Wynne say something,
what would
please.
happen to your school under a Duc Ford government? What would happen to your hospital under a Duc Ford government? And what would happen to every service that you depend on under a Duc Ford
Let me
government?
tell you what happened to schools under the Liberals. They closed 600 schools, more schools than any government
Ford,
ever
you built
in the
800.
history of
to put a
Ontario.
One at a time,
That's
Mr.
what would
Ford, one at a
happen.
time, please.
Mr. Ford, you refuse to put a moratorium on closures of schools. And you know
Oh,
what?
no,
the
that's not
schools
true,
are
actually.
often
Actually,
the glue
we did
that
put a
keeps
moratorium on
communities
schools.
together. And
Closing
I've been
the
to many
schools.
small communities in rural Ontario and all across the province where the schools were the only thing that the community had to hold the community together, to provide a place where families and neighbors could be together, taking their kids to school, bringing them home, and other events that took place at the school. And with all of the school closures that have taken place in our province, it has devastated communities. So we're going to stop that because we know that people deserve to have a decent community school. We're going to turn those schools into community hubs every chance that we get because people deserve to have those assets
the fact is,
in their
our
neighborhoods.
government is the first government
The
to
fact
even
is, I've
build
got to jump in
community
here.
hubs and build 800 schools. Come on, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, time for us to go. That is the end of question 2. Time now for question 3. This is the third and final question in the first segment of our debate here. The question's from us. Andrea Horvath, you'll have the chance to respond first. This question is about the character and values of our political leaders. The Ontario of 2018 is one where diversity, inclusiveness, gender equality are championed and considered by most as a good thing about living in this province.
And in this past year, we've seen a reckoning around sexual harassment and sexual assault. Each of your parties, be it federally or provincially, have had members who have been accused of misconduct in some way. What are you going to do to tackle the underlying problem of power imbalance within politics and in other professions?
That's a great question, and thank you very much for that. I have to say that one of the things that I believe is that you have to have decision makers around the decision-making tables that reflect our community to get a true balance of voices in terms of policy and decision-making. And so I'm proud to say that our team of candidates is 56% women. We have people from every ethno-cultural and religious background. We have young people. We have people from the LGBTQ community. So our group of potential MPPs will have a number of different lived experiences to bring to our table. One of the things that we have done, because we take this very, very seriously, is we've done some training already at the political level. So within our caucus, within our staff, within our constituency staff, we've been doing anti-racism and anti-sexism training. We've been trying to work with the unions that represent our workers to improve the language in our collective agreements, because nobody should go to work and be in a situation where they're feeling like they are vulnerable to racist or sexist attacks, or not feel that they can get ahead or promoted because of their gender or any other personal situation or background or faith that they have. So we've already started that journey, but it's one that we will never rest with. We'll continue to improve.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath. Duc Ford, your turn.
Well, we have the most diverse group of candidates I've ever seen in the PC party, from every race, from every culture, from every background. My friends, we have the best candidates I've ever seen ever in a party. We're ready to govern. We're ready to go out. We're ready to form government. Unlike the NDP, they have radical activists as candidates, absolutely radical activists that get their inspiration from Adolf Hitler.
Not true,
They get their
Mr. Ford.
they got
Mr.
it
Ford,
right
that's
there.
not
Inspiration
true.
He needs to
from
be allowed.
Adolf Hitler.
Shame on you.
Inspiration calling our veterans war. You know, they were actually one of your candidates came out and called our veterans war criminals. Another activist, political activist, believes in shutting down mines and making sure they celebrate when mines and forestry are closed. See, that's the radical activists that the NDP have surrounded themselves with. And as for using your power, that is unacceptable when anyone tries to use their power for any indiscretions. We will have zero tolerance when it comes to that. I can tell you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. That's time. We can pick it up during the debate segment. Kathleen Wynne.
Thanks so much. My whole life, I'm the eldest of 4 girls, and my whole life I have been very aware of the power imbalances in our society, whether at school, whether in our community at large, and it is really, really fundamental to me that we tackle these issues. I don't think it has anything to do with diversity. I think it has to do with human interaction, whoever we are. And so I have worked as the leader to make sure that we have rules in place, to make sure all of our staff at Queen's Park have been trained, all of our MPPs have been trained. We have a strict vetting process for candidates, but we've gone beyond that. I had a woman come up to me in Guelph the other night, and she works in the violence against women sector, and she said, for 30 years, she's worked in this sector, and there's never been a government that has been more supportive of that sector, has put more resources in place. So this is about our individual character, and it is about what we do in our caucus. I've had situations to deal with, and I've dealt with in my caucus. We have processes, but it's also about how we play a leadership role in the broader society and model those behaviors and make sure that we put those resources in place. It goes to what I said at the beginning. It's about how we use the power that we're given to make a lasting influence, make a lasting impact on people's lives.
Okay, Ms. Wynne, that's time. Thank you. Ms. Horvath, will you please get us started for open debate?
Thanks very much. I want to say straight up that any memes that had anything to do with Hitler is absolutely abhorrent, and it's something that I absolutely reject completely. But Mr. Ford's tabloid mudslinging against my candidates only foments divisiveness and hatred, and it has to stop. It's the wrong thing to do. Mr. Ford, you of all people, you have police investigations into by 3 different police forces into candidates, not from things that were dug up 10 years ago on Facebook, but right now from data that was stolen from 407 records. Mr. Ford, that's you and your candidates and your party.
The difference
Again, to the audience, I'd ask to hold your applause.
I mean, you live in a glass
The difference between myself and the NDP, I acted decisively, immediately. When your candidate, the radical activist, came out and criticized our veterans and said that Poppy should be landfill and that they're war criminals, are men and women that are fighting for the country, your comment was very simply free speech. You didn't act decisively. But again, when you were asked about the depth of your team, I love your comment. I'll send them to training school. I'll tell you, this is not time for training school to form a government.
Again, audience, I please ask the audience to calm down.
Mr. Ford, if you had more of a sense of humor and less of a sense of...
I think that what... And we're in an election, so this is a partisan time. I get that. But in between elections, we're just people in Ontario trying to find our way and trying to work together. And I think that we have to acknowledge that there are situations that every one of us has to deal with in our lives and as leaders that take action and honesty and transparency. That's the value system that each of us has to bring to this job, because every single one of us has had to deal with situations, and we need to be open, we need to be honest, and we need to tell the people of the province how we are dealing with those situations. This isn't a situation that is specific to one party. This is about our society, and we've got to work together to make sure that we find a way to deal with these problems that have literally been around for decades. We've got to find a way to deal with them, but we can't do it by slinging mud at each other and being dishonest. We have to tell the truth to each other.
And I don't disagree with you. I think you absolutely encapsulated the issue, Kathleen, and I appreciate that because it's true. There's no doubt that people come from different lived experiences. They have different opinions. But what I can say about the candidates on my team is that every single one of them wants to end hallway medicine. They want life to get better for Ontarians, and they're focused on our platform.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ms. Horvath. Our next segment could get very interesting. It's a chance for each of the leaders to ask one of the other leaders a question. I'm going to start with you, Ms. Wynne. What is your question and who is it for?
So my question is to the leader of the NDP. Andrea, you've promised never to use back-to-work legislation with the public sector union. And I just want to know if you've really thought that through, because what it means is that unions would know that there is no way that you can ever say no. They can go on strike until they get absolutely everything that they've asked for. And this isn't an abstract issue. The NDP blocked legislation that would have returned York students to class weeks ago. Difficult negotiations are going on right now with nuclear power workers. So you would put Ontario permanently on strike, or you'd empty the public purse to pay off huge union demands. So why would you put public sector unions first and the people of this province second?
Well, I want to say how disappointing I am to hear this from you. I expected a question like that from Mr. Ford, quite frankly, Ms. Wynne. But nonetheless, what I believe is that we have to prevent those kinds of labor disputes from happening in the first place. And when you have a government that cuts public education, that gives tax cuts to corporations instead of funding our healthcare system, that makes it more difficult for professors and staff and teaching assistants and others in universities and colleges to do a good job because their employer, the Government of Ontario, has created precarious work in their workplace, then you're going to end up in labor disputes. I mean, we have young people in our province who are graduating from college and university with a mountain of debt on their shoulders and no real opportunities to be able to build a good life. And the sad thing about that is that although the Liberals talk a good game about precarious work, and they brought in Bill 148 after much urging by the NDP to deal with precarious work, as an employer, they are basically encouraging precarious work in our colleges and universities. So one of the things that I have done is committed to taking the freeze off of the university and college funding and to do what other provinces, frankly, are doing, which is recognizing that in this day and age, with this uncertain economy, we need more people to be able to access college and university, but we also have to make sure that we're funding those institutions to improve the quality of education and the quality of work that they provide. And so it's not as simple as giving away all of the dollars to the workers. What it is about making sure that we're preventing those kinds of labor disputes in the first place, because we're respecting the workers that work for all of us, and we're making sure that we're funding our public institutions properly.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath, for the answer to that question. Now, Mr. Ford, you're going to have a chance, an uninterrupted chance to respond and weigh in on the discussion, and then we're going to have an open debate. Go ahead, please.
You want me to ask the question?
No.
You can respond to the discussion, to the same issue that we're talking about here.
Well,
It's
again,
the debate part.
I understand. My friends.
It's actually not the debate part.
No,
you can respond, have a statement.
You get to talk
I get
about
it.
this
I get
response.
it. I get it, ladies. Well, again, my friends, I look at this as who is going to stand up for the people. It's very simple. Who is going to have the best interest of the people at heart? Is it going to be the NDP? Or is it going to be the Liberals? Or is it going to be the PCs? And I think it's very clear who has the best interest of our economy, of our people at heart. We have a proven record at making sure that we save the taxpayers' money. We have a proven record that we're going to put money back into the taxpayers' pocket instead of the government's. I believe in empowering the people. I don't believe in empowering the government. I don't believe everything should be government run. I believe in respecting the people. That's what I believe in. The people can make decisions, not the government.
So,
Okay, we are going to start open debate, and Ms. Wynne, yes,
so
you can
the
get us started.
question, the question, and Andrew, I heard all of your, I heard your issue about the funding, but here was the question was, and I believe in collective bargaining. I think the collective bargaining process is a really
What
important
happened with
part
Bill
of our
115
democracy.
then, Kathleen?
I mean, I reversed that,
actually,
Andrea.
you don't respect the collective
Andrea,
bargaining
I
process. That's
absolutely
not
do.
the evidence.
Okay.
That's not how you've behaved, though.
Well, it
Really.
absolutely
You actually
is.
brought legislation into Ontario that
So-
totally stomped on the collective
Andrea,
bargaining process,
I
and you
reversed-
ended up at the Supreme Court of
and
Canada for
Andrea,
that.
I know that you are
That's like-
beholden. You're
that's-
beholden to the unions on this. I
Oh,
get that.
Kathleen,
I
wow.
get that. But
That's
here's
really
the issue. I
sad.
believe in
Really
collective
sad.
bargaining. I believe in it. But at a certain point, when all of the
You believe in it
tools
until you
collective-
don't anymore.
No, I believe
what
in
you
it
just said.
until there's an impasse that can't be resolved. And if you take away the one tool that government has,
It's
to
not a
act
government
in the
tool,
public
Kathleen.
interest, how
It
do
is
you,
not a
how do you
government
avoid
tool.
eternal strikes
That's how you continue
or an empty
to
public purse?
Okay,
That's
let's
the
just
question.
be clear, though. Let's just be clear. It is not a government tool. What it is the removal of constitutional rights. Look,
Not after you go through the process,
Look, you know
Andrea.
what?
You're
Can I just finish? I think that it's pretty clear that nobody likes strikes. It's not good for workers. It's not good for employers. When the employer's government, it's not good for government either. And it's certainly not good for families, particularly who are relying on government services when there is a strike. And that's why it's important to do everything you can to make sure that those strikes don't happen. But make no mistake, it's not as simple as what you're saying, Kathleen. It's not as simple as saying we're just going to take away people's constitutional rights because we have the power to do so.
I'm going to actually
No.
stop you all there. We haven't
Okay.
heard from Mr. Ford in a little bit, so I want to let him weigh in on this
He's
topic.
letting us
I kind of let them go at it for every once in a while there. And anyways,
you don't believe in
I
unions,
believe,
actually.
I do believe in fair collective bargaining. But the NDP, there's a point that you have to stop it because it puts the people in jeopardy. That's what puts people
there
in
are
jeopardy.
essential services,
You
Mr.
can just continue going on and
There are
on forever
essential services that
for
don't
a
have the
strike.
right to strike.
You look at some of these college strikes, university strikes, you're jeopardizing the students. Do you understand the last university strike? 26,000 students lost their job because they didn't go back to work. You could sit there, and again, I believe in fair collective bargaining. I don't believe in putting the public in jeopardy, and that's what you're doing. You're putting the people
Mr. Ford,
ahead.
how many students are going to be in jeopardy when you start cutting universities and colleges?
You're kind of on
That's what you're believing.
How much is that going to hurt?
The unions say jump,
how much
you
is that
say
going to
how
hurt
high.
students?
That's the difference.
The point that I want to make is that if there is no tool at the end of a collective bargaining process when there is no way to resolve an issue, how does government act in the public interest if that tool is removed? And we can go through long collective bargaining processes, and if there's an impasse, there has to be some tool there.
Forgive me for jumping in. That's our time for that one. We are now on to the next question. This is a leader-to-leader question. Andrea Horvath, you get to ask the question. What is it and to whom?
Thank you. My question is to Mr. Ford.
I didn't expect anything different.
Well, that's good. You're catching on. Mr. Ford, here we are. The polls opened yesterday, and you haven't told people what your $6 billion in cuts is going to look like. Now, you say that you respect the voters, that you respect Ontarians. You started, the people started going to the polls yesterday. They're in the at the polls today. They haven't got any idea of what your cuts are going to look like. What kind of cuts are going to happen in hospitals? How many nurses are going to be laid off? How many teachers are going to be laid off? How many public services are going to be cut to the bone? How many more people are going to be in hallways with your $6 billion of cuts? Why don't you think it's important to be honest and show people a platform?
That's the time for the question. Duc Ford, the answer, please.
Well, it's been pretty clear. Every single day I've been putting out announcements, and our announcements actually put a dollar figure beside it. And our announcements is about putting more money into people's pocket. We're going to reduce the hydro rates, which is the #1 issue right across this province with people and with companies. We're going to reduce that 12%. We're going to make sure that we reduce the cost of gas by 10 cents a liter. That is absolutely huge to every single person. I know that you think that driving, the NDP thinks driving's a luxury, but actually it's essential to day in and day out lives. My friends,
You're wrong, Mr. Ford. I don't think that.
We're going to make sure we reduce taxes. We're going to be the only government that actually reduces taxes by 20%. We've had a plan, and we're rolling it out every single day with costing. The difference is you made a $7 billion mistake on your own plan.
You're not being honest, Mr. Ford.
$1.5 billion a year times 5 years.
It's not true, Mr. Ford.
You're right up by $7 billion. That's the difference between having a plan and having no plan whatsoever, promising 30, 40, 50 billion dollars. I still don't know where you're getting all your money from. 40, 50 billion dollars. I know where you're getting it from. Do you know where they're going to get it from, my friends at home? They're getting it from you.
No.
They're getting it from the taxpayers.
Wrong, Mr. Ford.
That who's going to be paying the bill are the people. But I can tell you, tell you one thing. When our government comes into power, a new day will dawn, a day of prosperity, a day of opportunity, and a day of growth the likes this province has never seen before. We will blaze a new trail for each and every single person in this great province and give them opportunity and put money back into their pocket instead of the government's pocket. That's our plan.
Okay, audience, thank you. Thank you, audience. Audience, please, let's keep the applause to a dull roar, please. Kathleen Wynne, you have an opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Mr. Ford, you know, I think if you had a plan, you would share it with the people of Ontario. I think you would tell people exactly what you were going to do, and you would tell them what you were going to cut, and you were going to tell them why you were going to cut it, and you would tell them why that would be good for them. But I can tell you that, as I said, I'm standing here because I lived through what Mike Harris did to this province. And we have to remember that when you don't support or believe in public services, when you believe that it's okay to fire nurses, it's okay to take teachers out of schools, and you cut those services, then that hurts people. It hurts kids. You know, we were talking about strikes and unions. My kids were in school during the Harris years, and they were out of school more than they were in school some years because there was so much labor unrest. There was so little cooperation between the provincial government and our public services. So, Mr. Ford, it would be great if you would share with the people of Ontario exactly what you're going to do.
3 minutes of open debate now. Actually, Andrea Horvath, rules say you get the first kick at this.
Thanks, and I guess it's kind of shocking to me that Mr. Ford that you believe that announcements with a dollar figure beside them equals a platform and equals a costed platform. That's not how it works, Mr. Ford. And the people of Ontario deserve so much better than that. They deserve to know if you're going to be firing 20,000 nurses, if you're going to be shutting 780 hospitals. What exactly does it look like to have a Ford government in Ontario?
Well,
and you're not being honest with people about that. And I think that's what folks deserve, at the very least.
True
They
leadership.
True leadership is being honest with people about what
Audience,
you're
please.
gonna do.
Audience.
That's true leadership.
True leadership is not being dishonest. The NDP have been dishonest. Matter of fact, the last time the NDP were in office, 125,000 people lost their jobs. The economy was a disaster. You closed 10,000 hospital beds under the NDP. Do you know why they closed it? Because the economy started to tank. It was a disaster. Companies were leaving right, left, and center.
So
we're going to have the economy
here's-
booming
Time
under
for
our
Kathleen Wynne,
government.
please.
So here's the thing about having a plan, and whether, whichever one of us brings a plan forward, it has to be transparent, people have to understand it, and it has to be doable. Mr. Ford, we have no idea what your plan is. We have no idea what those cuts will be about. And Andrea, there's so many holes and gaps in your plan that it's not practical. So you need, it's hard to find the fairest way forward in the province. Leadership is about finding the fairest way forward for the largest number of people. That's hard work. It takes a lot of explanation and a lot of hard work to make sure you put the policies in place that are actually going to help people.
It's not fair
it's
to
not
have
a
people
slogan.
lined up in hallways in stretchers. And it's not fair to leave people over the age of 25 and under the age of 65 without prescription drug coverage. And it's not fair to have young moms with infants and toddlers who want to get back to work to bring their family income back.
Response from Ms. Wynne and then Mr. Ford. A response and then a response.
That's what's not fair. That's what's not fair.
It's also not fair to cover only 110 drugs when there are 4,400 on the formulary, which we're covering. And it's also not fair if you're going to put childcare in place that it doesn't work.
Okay, if I may, leaders, leaders, Duc Ford, please.
The only party that's going to be able to afford more people is the PC party. We're going to have the economy booming. We're going to need more teachers.
Come on.
We're going to need more nurses. We're going to need more doctors.
Show us the plan,
We're
Mr.
going to
Ford.
make sure that we have the economy booming because we have seen it. We have seen in the past. We have seen in the past. We lost 300,000 jobs under the Liberals.
We created nearly 1 million.
We would be in a financial disaster, my friends. Go talk to your employers.
That is time. We are moving on.
It would be a
Mr.
nightmare
Ford.
under the NDP.
Mr. Ford, the final question is yours. Who is it for?
Well, it would be to my friend heading up the NDP. Andrea, how will you prevent your NDP government from causing another recession like the last NDP government caused? And it was a disaster.
Well, Mr. Ford, unfortunately, I think you've got your facts wrong. The NDP was brought to power at a time when the economy was already failing. But that's because people were afraid of what a Ford or what a Conservative government might do. And what I want to say is this. We are in 2018 now. This is not this is not 1990, and I am certainly not Bob Rae. In fact, he's a Liberal now, and that's a whole other story. I don't want to get into it. But what I believe is that, in fact, the deficit that we have, the problems that we have in Ontario, the biggest economic challenge that we have is that our economy is not working for everyday people. Like the young woman I was talking about that I met in Scarborough. You know, there's been 25 years of Conservative and Liberal governments, and people still feel like they're struggling to get ahead. And that's why our plan says, yes, we will run a little bit of a deficit for the first couple of years, and we'll go back down to balance. But in the meantime, we've got to fix what Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals broke. We've got to make sure that families can get the prescription drugs they need, they can get the dental care that they need, that they can afford childcare. I mean, childcare is $2,000 a month for some families in Toronto. The Board of Trade says that 42% of young people are leaving Toronto because they can't afford to live here. That has to change. And so that's why our plan is all about making sure that the family budget is able to be kosher, that the family budget can be afforded, that people can build a good life here once again. And yes, Mr. Ford, we are going to ask the richest corporations and the richest people to chip in a little bit more to help us make sure that this prosperous province is a place where everybody has a chance to build a good life, because that's the very least that we can expect in a place like Ontario.
Okay, thank you for your answer, Ms. Horvath. Ms. Wynne, your turn to respond.
Yeah, and Andrea, the vision is a very good one. But the reality is that in Ontario today, we are seeing economic growth that is better than other jurisdictions in Canada. It's better than the United States. And we've balanced the budget, and that allows us to make the investments that we are making. It allows us to put more childcare in place. You know, we created full-day kindergarten. Kids from the age of 4 have full-day kindergarten. We did that. We brought that in. We're building 100,000 childcare spaces, but we know there's more to be done. I understand that there's more to be done. Families need more support. But you can't do that by having uncompetitive businesses. You need businesses to be able to compete.
Then why did you do what you did to hydro? Sorry.
Ms. Horvath.
I apologize.
Because, raising the property taxes on business by an average of 28% is not going to make us more competitive. I've spent a lot of time in the United States fighting for businesses in a very uncertain economy, global economy, in the NAFTA situation.
And that's your time, Ms. Wynne. That is your time. Thank you very much. It's time for another open debate. And Mr. Ford, you can kick us off.
Let's be real here with the NDP. You're saying you're going to go after the largest companies. You'll spend $50 billion. There won't be any large companies to go after because they're all going south of the border. Let's be realistic here. And all these so-called rich people, and I'd like to know who all the so-called rich people are.
You're giving them $1,200 bucks a year. You should know them.
I'll tell you one thing. There's a lot more middle class.
You're giving them $1,200 bucks a year
NDP,
with your tax cuts, Mr. Ford. That's what you favor.
The NDP will annihilate, my friends, the middle class. We've seen it before.
Mr.
You know
Ford,
something?
Mr.
I wouldn't
Ford,
even say.
You're not being honest, Mr. Ford. I don't think you've even read my plan.
I wouldn't even say that.
You have not read my
about
plan.
the Liberals.
My plan
because
protects,
the NDP
my
and even the Liberals
protects,
know they're terrified
Mr. Ford,
businesses.
let's let Ms. Horvath speak.
My plan actually protects
Absolutely
middle
terrified.
class and low-income families. And what it does is say that the richest amongst it doesn't raise it on small businesses. It doesn't raise taxes on low-income families, on middle-class families, but on the richest Ontarians, like yourself, it does.
Goodness.
And what your plan does is give $18 to people earning under $49,000 a year. So you say you're for the people, Mr. Ford, but people in Ontario can't afford this.
We're gonna let Ms. Wynne have a say now. Go ahead, Ms. Wynne.
What we have had to do to get to the place where Ontario's economy is doing as well as it has, creating nearly 1 million jobs, what we've had to do is find a balance. So not being beholden to the rich, as Duc Ford is, not being beholden to one group like the unions, not being beholden to a particular group, but finding the practical solutions to the problems that confront us as a society. We have technological change. We have climate change. We have an aging population. Those are all challenges that have to be part of the solution. We have to tackle those, and we have. Is there more to do? Absolutely. But we have been able to find a balance working with business, working with labor to have a thriving economy.
As you cut corporate tax rates in Ontario, people started lining up in our hospitals on stretchers. You know, you should not have, an 80-year-old man or 78-year-old man in a hospital washroom with his pillow by a toilet in the province of Ontario.
No
and
doubt
your
that there's
cuts have done that, Ms. Wynne, as you've cut the corporate tax rate. When I talk to businesses, you know what they tell me? They tell me that they want to see a workforce that's well educated.
Andrea,
they want to see transportation systems that work for them. They want to see electricity rates
Ms.
that
Horvath,
are competitive in the province of Ontario.
And that's exactly what they have. They have a highly skilled workforce. They are competitive because of the society that we've built. But we're not going to continue to cut taxes the way Duc Ford is talking about.
Leaders, that is our time for this segment. We have had the journalist questions for part 1. We have had leader asking leader question for part 2. We're now into part 3, which is questions from the public. We have invited members of the public to send us their questions. We got hundreds of them. We picked 6 for the debate tonight, and so we're going to go into our audience here at the CBC in the atrium, downtown Toronto, for the first question, and Andrew Horvath, you will get the first chance to answer. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you for all the candidates for listening to my questions, and thank you for the media for choosing me. My name is Martin Badger. I'm 19 years old, and I'm a first-time voter from Burlington. My question is for all 3 candidates. How do you plan to pay for all the additional services that you're promising in your plans?
Andrew Horvath.
Thanks very much, Martin, and I really appreciate the question. And I know that there are people across our province who are very concerned about the accumulated debt, and that's something that I'm concerned about as well. But as I said earlier, I'm also concerned about the family debt and the inability of families to make ends meet in a province that's really quite prosperous. And after a couple of decades of my colleagues being at the helm, we see families having a harder time. And so what our plan does is it protects everyday families. It protects middle-class families, low-income families. It protects small business. But what it does do, as we strive to get rid of hallway medicine and as we strive to bring more opportunity and less debt to students and deal with our electricity system that's costing far too much for everyone, as we put those plans in place, we're going to ask the richest corporations and the richest people amongst us to pay a little bit more to help us pay for that. And our plan does show a trajectory down to balance. So once the family's stable, we'll deal with the deficit.
Duc Ford, it's your turn.
Oh, Martin, thanks for the question. I can tell you, my friend, everywhere I go, I've crisscrossed Ontario and I've asked people, do you think the government of Ontario wastes 4% of every single dollar? I've talked to tens of thousands of people, and not one person has ever told me, no, they're efficient. Matter of fact, what we're going to do, we're going to bring outside auditors in to go line item by line item to find efficiencies. Our own Auditor General said she can find $1 billion with no one losing their jobs. But most importantly, do you know what I'm going to do, Martin? I'm going to go to the frontline workers. The frontline workers that understand their job better than anyone, because I've talked to them. There's endless efficiencies when I talk to the frontline workers. They're excited about the PC government coming in there and turning the ship around. We'll make sure it's easier and more affordable when you go out to buy a home under a PC government.
That's your time, Mr. Ford. Kathleen Wynne.
Thanks.
Okay, audience. Thank you, audience. Thank you.
Martin, thanks for your question. And we've made a deliberate decision that having brought the books to balance in Ontario, that we are going to invest in people to make sure that people have the child care that they need, that families have the home care that they need. Because if we don't make those investments, there's actually a bigger debt that has to be paid down the line. The population is aging in this province, and we know that there's more support that families need who have young kids and may be looking after an elderly parent or grandparent. And so we're going to make those investments. We have a path to balance that's laid out in our budget. We are being very careful about the way we manage our fiscal house, which is the way we have been able to balance the budget. But if we don't invest in people, if we don't build that foundation for the future, then we're going to pay later. And so that's why we've made the decision to invest in people, to make sure we continue to have that highly skilled workforce that we already have in Ontario.
Thank you, Ms. Wynne.
And the care that people need.
Thank you, Ms. Wynne. 2.5 minutes, leaders of open debate. Andrea Horvath, you can start it off.
Well, I think it's important to know that folks like Martin are worried about what governments plan to do to pay for the things that they talk about. I know that young people are worried about a whole bunch of other things. I think sometimes we assume that young people are only worried about things like tuition fees, but we know that in fact young people are global citizens, and they're very, very concerned about a number of different issues. And I think Martin's question really illustrates exactly that. But we are in a situation in our province where the benefits of the prosperity that our province has been providing have been going to the few at the top as opposed to everyone else. And you don't have a situation where a mom who works full-time is forced to go to a food bank to feed her kids if the economy was working for families. And so we have to make sure not only that we have an economy that's working well, but that that economy is ensuring that people have a decent quality of life.
Martin, let me just address to one of the specifics that we have in our platform, which is that as we overachieve, as we've done every year at the end of the year, overachieved on our targets, we've made a commitment to put all of that money, whether it's $2.5 billion, which is about what we've overachieved every year, that will go to debt repayment. But the other thing is that we need to make sure that you have all the supports that you need today. And I completely agree that one of the concerns of young people is the future. But the investments that we're making today, whether it's dealing with climate change, whether it's tuition being covered for low and middle income, and the fact is we saw for the first time in 4 years a reduction in food bank usage. So we're actually seeing a plan that's working on all fronts.
Toronto became the child poverty capital of Canada.
Horvath, Mr. Ford.
Government, and make no mistake about it, it will be 10 times worse under the NDP. 10 times worse. We have the largest subnational debt in the entire world, $346 billion. We're paying $12.5 billion of your money to service the debt. My friend, I travel around and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of companies. They are terrified of the NDP coming in. They have told me personally, we will pack up and we will go down south in half a second. God forbid the NDP ever get in. They will destroy our province and destroy our economy.
And that's our time for this question. Thank you.
That's fact. That's real, my friend.
Our next question, Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford, the next question is actually for you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Scanlon, and I'm from Toronto. Mr. Ford, you are totally against the carbon tax, and you do not support wind power or other green initiatives. So here's my question. Do you believe in global warming? And if so, what concrete proposals do you have to tackle this issue?
Well, Tom, great question. And yes, I believe in global warming. I actually believe, Tom, in man-made global warming. But what I don't believe in, my friends, is putting an artificial tax called the carbon tax, the cap and trade, that does absolutely nothing, Tom, to help the environment. What it does, it hurts families. It drives up the cost of gas, drives up the cost of every single product you make. The carbon tax is the single worst tax anyone, not just in Ontario, Canada can ever have. It makes us uncompetitive against people around the world and south of the border. The cap and trade, I call it the big cap and trade scam. We're shipping, we're sending off hundreds of millions of dollars over to California for these so-called credits. It does nothing to help the economy whatsoever. It actually hurts families. It hurts every single person here, every person in Ontario, and it makes us uncompetitive.
Ms. Wynne, I invite you to now respond to the same question, please. Mr. Ford, Mr. Ford, it's Ms. Wynn's turn.
So one of the reasons that we chose cap and trade in this province is that we worked with businesses, and businesses said cap and trade makes sense, because what cap and trade is about reducing carbon emissions, reducing greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change, and it's about the polluters paying. It's about the big polluters that are emitting, paying, and they worked with us and they said, you know what, creating a market, and I actually would have thought, Mr. Ford, that you would get this and like this, a market that we've linked with Quebec and with California, a free market that allows businesses to operate and to buy those allowances and reduce their emissions and invest in technology, because that money goes back to them and it goes back to people to retrofit their houses. That's how the cap and trade system works. It tackles climate change, reduces pollution, and it actually puts the onus on the people who are producing that pollution to pay. It is...
That's your time, Ms. Wynne.
It is.
Ms.
Good.
Horvath, it's your turn to speak.
Thanks very much. We actually didn't have a problem with the idea of cap and trade. In fact, we supported the government's legislation. We were disappointed, though, that Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals didn't take our advice on a number of pieces, because what we had asked them to do is to take 25% of the revenues that come in from cap and trade to help communities and people in Ontario that struggle a little bit more. So, for example, lower income families, people who have a difficult time doing their part to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and their carbon footprint. So, Tom, we had hoped that a fairness measure would have been built in. Other jurisdictions have built in fairness measures to their programs. Unfortunately, that didn't happen here. So whether it's low-income families, whether it's, for example, remote communities in the Northwest or smaller rural communities in the northern parts of Ontario, or whether it's trade-exposed companies, we thought there should have been some fairness, some effectiveness measures built in, and some transparency that we don't see.
Time now for open debate. Mr. Ford, I invite you to get us started.
Let's be real here. The cap and trade takes $466 million out of businesses here and goes to California. I believe in keeping the $466 million here in Ontario to make sure we can invest into people, invest in equipment, and create great paying jobs.
What's real is climate change, and we have to deal with it, Mr. Ford. Talk about getting real. What's real is climate change, and we have to deal with it.
Let Ms. Horvath have a say, and then we'll
They
have
want
let
to
Ms. Wynne
increase
speak.
the carbon tax even higher with the
Mr.
NDP.
Ford?
I think he talks so much he can't listen.
Let's let her have her time to respond.
What I was trying to say is that what's real, what we have to get real about is our responsibility in terms of our environment. What we have to get real about is making sure that we're taking proactive measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce our carbon footprint. And our plan talks not only about that, about making it a more fair plan and building in the transparency that we need so that we can measure the effectiveness, but also about making sure, for example, that we're protecting our clean water sources. I mean, we have big companies that are coming into Ontario that are threatening municipal well systems, and there's nothing that's being done about that.
I'm going to stop you right there, Ms. Horvath. Ms. Horvath, I'm going to stop you right there and let Ms. Wynne have a say. Thank you.
All of those aspects are built into our plan. You know, the fairness, I assume, Andrea, that you're supportive of the millions of dollars that we have put from the cap and trade revenue into social housing retrofits. I assume that you support the fact that every dollar can be accounted for, and that money goes back into people's hands to retrofit their houses. It goes back to businesses to create technology. I assume that beyond the cap and trade, that you support the Greenbelt and you support the protections and the broadening of the Greenbelt to protect our water source protection. Doug, you know, the reality is that the flooding and the fires that are happening across this world have to be dealt with. You have no plan to do that. We're the government that has brought in a plan that is actually dealing with that.
Let's let Mr. Ford respond.
We shut the coal-fired
Ms. Wynne,
plants.
we only have a few seconds left in this segment. Go ahead,
Okay.
Mr. Ford.
Well, again, I go back to we're losing jobs in the Green Energy Act. We should be keeping the money here. We shouldn't be sending it off to the U.S. With a carbon tax, it's the single worst tax ever on anything, on everyone. It's a terrible tax.
That is our time for this segment. We are going on to our next question. This is also from a member of the public. This one's coming in on video, so watch the monitors here in the studio. This is a voter from Ottawa, and here we go.
Hello, my name is Sherry Duplessis, and I live in Ottawa, Ontario. This is my question. What are you going to really do about hydro and these executives taking more and more money while the prices go up and up for all of us? Why is it that if they're fired or let go, they take away so much money? I served our country and I'm an injured vet with not a lot to live on. I could only dream of making a minuscule amount of money like them. They have a lot of people working for them that are never even noticed, yet they make a lot more money and they can give themselves more money. What are you going to do to help the people of Ontario truthfully?
Kathleen Wynne.
Sherry, thank you very much for that question, and thank you for serving the country. And we have reduced electricity bills by 25%. We recognize that all of the investment that we made to rebuild a system that was degraded when we came into office, that we had brownouts and blackouts, we've made that investment because previous governments hadn't. And that's actually not a partisan comment because NDP, Liberal, and Conservative governments didn't make those investments. But the salary that is being paid to the Hydro One executive, because I know that that is who the question is about, we have said that it was unacceptable. We've actually required that there is a review that would happen of that salary. We acted right away as soon as we had the information that that was the salary that was being voted in at the board. We made a statement that that review needed to happen, and that review is happening right now with outside objective advisors doing the review. It isn't acceptable. It was too much money, and that's why we exercise that authority.
Ms. Wynne, Ms. Horvath, it's your turn.
Well, I certainly hear your frustration, Sherry. We've seen this far too often. It's happened in our electricity system, which, by the way, the Conservatives started to privatize and deregulate in the 90s, and Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals have continued on that path with the privatization of Hydro One. And in fact, what we've discovered is that when that salary increase, at least for the board members that recently happened, the $25,000 boost that the board members voted for themselves for, apparently our government-appointed board members abstained from the vote. New Democrats have been hearing what you say, Sherry, very clearly, and have tried for years now to get the Liberal government to put a cap on those runaway salaries. But Mr. Ford talks about the $6 million man that Ms. Wynne has got at Hydro One. He's only going to replace that $6 million man with his own $6 million man and his own group of cronies, because he, as well as Kathleen Wynne, believe in the privatization of our hydro system.
Time,
we
Ms.
don't.
Horvath. Duc Ford, please.
Well, first of all, thank you, Sherry, for your service. God bless you. Sherry, I'm the only one, as the NDP stood by and watched this go on for years after years after years, not saying a word. The $6 million man was brought to light under Duc Ford and the PCs. The $6 million man is going to be gone on June the 7th, and the board that had their backroom deals to give themselves an increase. Just think of this. Wouldn't you love a job out there working 36 hours a year, 12 board meetings, and you're making $185,000? Under the NDP, under the Liberals, they condoned it. They just totally ignored it.
Wrong, Mr. Ford.
The NDP was down there watching it happen, not saying a word. I'm the only one that will get rid of the $6 million man.
You're not being truthful.
And get rid of the board and lower your hydro rates by 12%.
Audience, please. Audience.
Wow.
Audience. All right, we've got 2.5 minutes for open debate. Kathleen Wynne, you can start it.
You know, the electricity system in this province is it's a critical part of our infrastructure. And it was a mess in 2003. It was a mess because governments after governments had not made the investments that needed to be made. We've cleaned this electricity system up. We shut the coal-fired plants. And you know what, Andrea, you want people to believe that we sold Niagara Falls, and we did not. We did not do that. You want people to believe we sold the water, and we did not. We sold a piece of a piece of a piece, and we sold that in order to build roads and bridges.
That's not true, Kathleen.
That is absolutely
That is not true. In fact, the Financial Accountability Officer has said that that is the worst way to fund infrastructure projects. And in fact, the money that's come from Hydro One has not yet gone to any infrastructure projects.
Every dollar
it's still sitting in the trust.
No,
excuse me. Audience, please. Kathleen Wynne to respond, then Duc Ford.
Every dollar that came from the broadening of the ownership of Hydro One is going to infrastructure. If it is not spent today, it is allocated for all of those projects. And Andrea,
Ms. Horvath, let her finish, please.
The reality is, not only did we have to clean up the electricity system, we also had to build infrastructure that had not been built. Holes had been filled in on roads that the Tories were going to build subways on. We had not built infrastructure in this province for years. So yes, we found a way. We raised taxes on the richest people, we borrowed, and we leveraged an asset that the people of Ontario own to build new assets for the people of Ontario. That's what we did.
Duc Ford.
Well, Sherry, I'm the only one. I'm the only one that's going to reduce your hydro rates. I'm the only one that's going to get rid of the $6 million man and replace them like Quebec Hydro is $550,000 a year. I'm going to make sure I get rid of the board. But even the Auditor General said we overpaid $9.2 billion on renewable energy. That's the problem. The Green Energy Act is an absolute scam. Nothing but a scam. And Sherry, people like yourself, You're paying for it. We are not competitive anywhere in North America. We have the highest hydro rates in North America. We can't compete. I will make sure we compete. I'll make sure we create great paying jobs.
You got to tell the truth, Doug. You got to tell the truth.
Fact.
That's our time for this segment. Our next question from the audience goes to you, Ms. Horvath.
Hello, my name is Peter Spite, and I live in Toronto. My question is this. My wife and I have struggled to find an infant spot for our son, and for the past 2 years, we've been paying over $20,000 a year in daycare. Because of the high costs and lack of childcare spaces, we cannot afford to have any more children. Will you and your party commit to immediately making childcare more affordable and work to make more spots by publicly funding childcare programs instead of individuals by putting in place low fees or no fees for parents?
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate the question, and I have to say it's got to be a heart-wrenching decision to want to have a growing family and know that that the thing that's restricting that dream from happening is the cost of childcare in Ontario. And unfortunately, not only your family, but many families in Ontario are facing the same thing. There's a severe shortage of licensed quality childcare in Ontario, and it's very unaffordable. So my answer is yes. Our plan does exactly do that. And not only does it provide an average of $12 a day or less for 70% of families needing childcare, under 40,000 completely free, but we focus our plan to start with infants and toddlers because we know that mums and dads have to get back into the workforce to pull up their income and get back to a family budget that's something that they can handle. And so we are looking forward to being able to not only provide the affordability, but build 202,000 spaces of new childcare.
Ms. Horvath, thank you. Mr. Ford, your response, please.
Well, Peter, we're the only ones with a plan that actually focuses on children from 0 to 15 years of age. Under the NDP and under the Liberals, it's again government run. Peter, I believe you should have the choice. You should have the choice. We are offering $6,750 per child to go and get a babysitter, get a nanny, go to the daycare of your choice, not a government-run one. If you want to go to, in the summer, put your kids in a day camp, you can do that under their plan. You can't do that. And by the way, for the millions of people that are out there that working afternoons and evenings, their plan doesn't work. It's a government-run daycare system that people don't want to put their kids in, and it's open from 8 in the morning till 4:30. Ours, you can use it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because we believe
thank you,
you
Mr.
should
Ford.
have a choice, not
Ms.
the
Nguyen,
government.
it's your turn now to respond.
So, Peter, this is a really serious concern, and you know, we've been building the system by putting in place full-day kindergarten, by building 100,000 childcare spaces, and now we're taking the next step because I've talked to families for whom the decision about daycare is going to determine whether they have another child or not. The ability to find daycare is about that. So. The reality is that you have to build the system that is going to work. And so the difference between what the NDP is suggesting and what we're suggesting is that we have talked to the experts, we've looked at the capacity in the system, and we're providing free preschool childcare from 2.5 to 4, and we're working with all of the providers that are licensed. So whether it's not for profit or profit, or whether it is in a school, wherever it is, or whether it's in a home. And the difference is that the NDP, because of their ideology, won't work with for-profit or private.
Thank you for your answer. We're going to open up the floor for debate. And Ms. Horvath, if you could get us started, please.
I want to start by saying I'm proud of the fact that I don't think people should be reaping profits off the care of our children. I don't think that that's a positive thing. And in fact, it's very clear that the not-for-profit sector, and it's shown in all of the studies, provides about a 15% quality edge over for-profit services. And so I want the highest quality childcare for our children in Ontario, and that's what our plan provides. But it also provides an acknowledgement that we want moms to be able to go back to work early if they so choose. It not only helps the family, but it also helps the economy. And it helps to deal with something that I know the Liberals talk talk about a
And
lot,
that is-
which is
Horvath,
pay
let's let-
equity.
and that-
And the
let's
best
let-
way to
let's
get to
let
pay
Ms. Wynn
equity
answer
is
this,
having
please.
women back in the
Let's let
workforce
Ms. Wynn
when they
answer
want
the
to be back
question.
in the workforce.
If we are going to deal with the gender wage gap, you're absolutely right, Andrea. We have to help women get back to work. But to characterize small, really well-run, licensed for-profit childcares as somehow reaping benefits off the backs of kids it's just a mischaracterization. That's not how it works. The reality is there are great businesses all over the province that are small childcares. As long as they're licensed, they should have a chance to provide that childcare. And that's the difference between you and me. I'm looking for the fairest, most practical solution, and you're looking for the purest ideological solution.
I'm looking for the highest quality for
to
our
make
kids.
sure we do the best for the kids.
Let's let Mr. Ford. Let's let Mr. Ford have his say on this subject, please.
Peter, the difference is once your child turns 4 or 5, they're done. They're done with their plans. Our plan goes up to the age of 15. You want to put your children in a government daycare, or would you rather have a choice? We believe in letting the people have a choice rather than the government telling you where you should have your son or daughter taken care of.
How much is your rebate, Doug? How much is your rebate? About $2,000 bucks? It's not going to help with your $20,000 of childcare costs.
And by the way, you don't have to be there from 8 o'clock in the morning to 4:30 because we know the government shuts down after 4:30, 5 o'clock.
Oh.
If you work night times, you work afternoons,
Have you ever been to a daycare?
You will be able to.
Apparently not.
4:30.
I'm planning to go down to Queen's
That's our
Park.
time, leaders. That is our time for that segment. We're going on back to Eastern Ontario for our next question from the members of the public. This is someone from Nepean, Ontario. Mr. Ford, you'll get the first chance to answer, again, via video. Let's go.
My name is Daljit Singh Nirman from Nepean, and my question to all the leadership candidates is, can you please explicitly outline your plan of action in improving the deteriorating Ontario healthcare? In particularly, what concrete and practical steps would be initiated towards reducing the wait time in the emergency room of the hospitals and specialist appointments?
Mr. Ford.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the question. We have the greatest healthcare team we've ever put together, headed up by Dr. Ruben Devlin, the former CEO of Humber River Hospital. My friends, he's compiled the best doctors because I've always said we have the best doctors and the best nurses and the best frontline healthcare workers there ever is. Unfortunately, these same doctors and nurses and frontline healthcare workers have been beaten down under this Liberal government for 15 years. We're going to make sure that we listen to the frontline doctors and the nurses. We're going to listen to the nurses. And when the economy gets going, we're going to hire more nurses because we are creating 30,000 new long-term care beds in 10 years. We're putting $1.9 billion to mental health, addiction, and housing. We're going to make sure that we take care of seniors, the most vulnerable seniors out there. We'll take care of their
that's your
dental
time.
care
Kathleen
for
Wynne.
100,000 seniors.
Kathleen Wynne. Audience, thank you. Kathleen Wynne.
Valjit, thank you for asking the question. It's so important to our society, our healthcare system. My dad and my grandfather were both family docs, and I watched them and listened to them tell stories about people who had to leave baked goods on the front step because they couldn't pay for their healthcare visits. So our healthcare system is a treasure, and we have invested in it every single year. But the reality is that our population is aging, and there's more that we have to do. We are committing $822 million to hospitals. That's on top of $500 million that we put in our budget last year that hospitals saw. We've worked with the Ontario Hospital Association to make sure that they have what they need. But mental health supports are huge. $2.1 billion we're committing to mental health supports. We know that there's a need for more home care. It's not a single thing that needs to be done. We have to work on all of these fronts to make sure that we meet the needs of everyone in the province.
Andrea Horvath.
Valjit, you brought a question forward that is on the minds of every Ontarian that I talk to. When they see the anguish that family members are put through watching their loved ones in hallways in hospitals with no dignity, with no privacy, with noise and commotion 24 hours a day, and sometimes they're in those hallways for days and days and days on end. It is a horrifying situation. Nobody should have to go through that, and nobody should watch their loved one, have to watch their loved one deal with that kind of care in a hospital. And it's not the frontline workers, the nurses and doctors and PSWs and all of the hospital staff are beside themselves with anxiety and angst about the mess in our hospitals. You can't freeze hospital budgets for 5 years and not expect this kind of thing to happen. So we will fund them properly. We're going to have a moratorium on any further layoffs. We're going to fund long-term care and home care to make sure all of us have the kind of quality health care that we deserve.
2.5 minutes of open debate, starting with Duc Ford.
Well, first of all, more than 4,300 patients at Brampton Civic Hospital were dealt with in the hallways. We're going to end hallway health care once and for all. And the way we're going to end it is by getting input by the doctors and the nurses. Not a bunch of politicians that they think they know better than the doctors or nurses from Queen's Park. We're actually going to get input from the frontline healthcare workers, the nurses, and the doctors.
I just had
We're going to need more nurses. We're going to need more nurses because the economy is going to grow. We're going to need more nurses to take care of the 30,000
Kathleen Wynne,
long-term care beds.
You know what, Doug? You could have had those conversations, then you could have had a platform written. Because the fact is that that's actually how you write policy. That's how you develop a platform and policies. You talk to the people in the field. You understand what they're going through. And we have not, we have increased funding every single year in our healthcare system.
You don't just talk to them, though, Kathleen. You have to listen to them.
Exactly.
And when they were sounding the alarm bells about your cuts to our hospital system, you ignored them and you continued to freeze those budgets. And now we have a terrible situation in our hospitals. They are not funded the way that they should be. Even this current budget, you shorted the hospitals by $300 million from what they had asked.
Yeah, so
that's why our loved ones are not getting what they need.
I am the first to admit that there's more that we need to do in healthcare, including hospitals, which is why $822 million is allocated. But every single year in our budgets, we have increased the funding to healthcare. The reality is more people want care at home. We've put billions of dollars into home care. Mental health is an area that is much more, we're much more aware of the needs there, and we're increasing funding to mental health.
Last 25 to Mr. Ford.
Well, every single one of us rely on doctors. We have the greatest doctors and nurses in the entire world. My friends, call up your doctor when you're calling up your employer and ask them who they support to run the healthcare system. They'll say the PC government. Very simple. They'll say the PC government overwhelmingly. The doctors support.
That's not what they said when we had a round table with them.
That's about doctor compensation.
It is now time for our final question. Audience, if I could ask you to please refrain from your applause because we have our final question. It's for Ms. Wynne.
My name's Bob Hamilton. I'm from Toronto. Each of you have had a negative legacy from a previous government to overcome. Kathleen Wynne has Dalton McGuinty and the gas plant scandal. Andrea Horvath, you have Bob Ray and Ray Days. Duc Ford, you've got Mike Harris and cuts to health care and education. I'd like to know what you can do to reassure voters, if elected, that history will not repeat itself.
Bob, that is a great question. And I think it points to what I said earlier about things get very partisan in an election period, but people really see government as an entity that should be doing the things that are going to meet their needs. And so when I became the leader, when I became the premier of this province, I worked to resolve the issues that were confronting me. And so we changed the rules around the Green Energy Act. We made it clear that we understood that there had been problems with the way information was dealt with during the whole discussion around gas plants, and we changed the rules. And that's how I have operated. I have when there's been a challenge that has confronted me, whether it's something that was left over from my predecessor or whether it's a new challenge, I have looked to find the way to put in place a structure that's going to allow for the problem to be solved and for us to go forward in the most open, fairest way possible.
It's your turn to answer this question.
Thanks very much, and I appreciate the question, Bob. And I think it speaks to something we were talking about a little early on, and that is the cynicism that people end up feeling when they elect governments expecting them to fulfill their promises and then only discover that, in fact, those promises don't get fulfilled. And what I can tell you is this: that's why we worked so hard on putting our platform together. We worked on it for about 2 years, and it is a very detailed platform, and it talks not only about the things that we believe we can do to make life better for families in Ontario, but also how we pay for that. So there's no surprises. We actually launched the platform a couple of weeks before the election even took place, and some of our plans have been online for a couple years now, like our hydro plan, for example, because it really should be about transparency and giving people the opportunity to engage with potential governments, with leaders, with parties, about what the future is that we can build together, because that's what it has to be about, building our future together.
Thank you, Ms. Horvath. Mr. Ford, your response, please.
Well, Bob, I appreciate the question, because I don't trust politicians either. I say that publicly. I don't see eye to eye with a bunch of politicians. I'm the only person up here that actually, Bob, has a track record of what we say we're going to do, we did. We said we're going to save the taxpayers money in the city of Toronto. We saved them $1.16 billion. We made sure the city was booming. I have a proven track record. And Bob, I can tell you, when I tell the people out there, not one single person in Toronto lost their job, and I'll tell you, not one single person will lose their job in Ontario. Don't believe the dishonest NDP when they run these scare tactics. The only people that are going to lose their job is when the economy plunges under the NDP. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying to the people of Ontario. And Bob, you lived through it. People are terrified, economically, disaster under the NDP. I'm actually scared about it.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Thank you, Mr. Ford. Ms. Wynne, please begin our final round of open debate.
So I just want to go back to what Bob said, and in a leadership role, you have to take responsibility for everything that's on your plate. And some of what's on your plate got there because of what other people did, and some of what's on your plate got there because of things that you've done. But no matter what's there, you have to be upfront with people. You have to say, this is what I understand the situation to be, and this is what I'm doing about it. And that's about changing rules in government. It's about reversing decisions. It's about apologizing when there are challenges. There are things that shouldn't have happened. But at the end of the day, it's about finding solutions that are fair for the greatest number of people, and doing that by talking to the people who have the solutions, talking to people who are smarter than we are, and making sure that the decision fits the problem.
Let's get
that's exactly what I have worked to do.
Ms. Horvath, and then Mr. Ford in on this discussion. Go ahead.
Well, again, it's really about engaging people in the vision that they want to see in the future of the province, and that's what our plan does. And I know Mr. Ford's using some pretty strong language around what our plan is, but our plan's pretty fundamental, and that is every single decision that government makes has to have the people at the heart of that decision, and it shouldn't be about trying to get a bump in the polls, and it shouldn't be about manipulating the timing so that it looks good on you for an election. It should mean every single day, every single week, every single month, and every single year in the 4 years of a mandate that you have, you should be putting the best interests of people at the heart of every single decision making.
Mr. Ford,
and I think
you get the last 30
the fact
seconds.
That people don't see that
Mr.
is
Ford?
what makes them disappointed in government.
Bob, it's very simple. Who do you trust with your investments? Who would you hand your wallet over to? The NDP, the Liberals, or the PC? I could ask the majority of the province this, and I know what the answer is going to be. They don't trust the NDP. Businesses, Bob, are terrified. I can't stress that enough. They're terrified,
How do you trust
and they will
somebody
be
without a
leaving.
platform?
Who do you
by
trust
the
with your
droves.
children, Doug?
Who
do you trust with your parents, Doug?
125,000 jobs, and you lost 300,000 jobs.
We're just getting rolling,
It's
and now we're out of time. Friends, that is it for this round and for this debate. I wonder if this audience would join us in thanking Kathleen Wynne, Duc Ford, and Andrea Horvath for participating in tonight's Leaders Debate.
Thank you to our audience here. Thank you to our audience at home. And on behalf of Steve and I, thank you for everyone who sent in questions, who took the time to think of these questions and to send them to us. And remember, advance polls are already open.
And vote June 7th.
That's right. Take
June
the time.
7th.
Get out and vote.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us. Good night.
Good night.
You can stay in the know anytime, anywhere with the free CBC News app. All the local, national, international, and breaking news you need. Download it today.
Well, there you go. The third and final debate for the Ontario leaders as they get ready for Election Day, just 11 days away now, 10 days of campaigning left. The debate may be over, but it's not the last we'll see of the leaders tonight. We are expecting that they will come out and answer a couple of reporter questions over the course of the next hour, and we're going to bring you those scrums live to you as well. We're also going to bring you, of course, some context and analysis that you need with our expert team. So let's start that debrief with our panel. NDP strategist Brad Living in Toronto, Conservative strategist Chad Rogers in Toronto, and Liberal strategist Rob Silver in Ottawa. I'm going to start. I'm not sure Rob can hear us yet, so I'm not going to start there because then he won't have a chance to weigh in. But let me play this clip because it's how the debate started, and it was an interesting moment for Kathleen Wynne, something that she has sort of hinted at in some of the ads and some of the lines that she's been giving over the past week or so. But she was blunt and came right out of the gate saying this. Take a listen.
Sorry. Not sorry. I'm really genuinely sorry that more people don't like me. But I am not sorry about all of the things that we're doing in Ontario to make life better. I'm not sorry that we're covering tuition for 235,000 students. I'm not sorry that we're protecting the environment. And I'm really not sorry that we're no longer asking single moms to raise a family on $11.40 an hour.
Okay, we're working to get Rob Silver back because he's the Liberal here, and he should probably react to that first. But Chad, what did you make of that? I mean, there has been obviously a lot of talk about Kathleen Wynne and about whether there is some sort of just general disdain for her or dislike of her. She took it head on. She apologized and then said, "I'm not going to be sorry for all the good things I think I've done." What did you make of that tactic?
It was remarkably pious, and it was hugely painful and destructive to the people with Liberal after their name on the ballot around the province. She said that her legacy and Ontarians admitting they're wrong if they didn't agree with it is more important than her candidates getting elected or the Liberal Party's survival going forward. Kathleen Wynne's only going to be leader of the party for another 10 or 11 days, and the damage she did to her legacy tonight is concerning because, frankly, she's always owned the fair and reasonable position when she's at her best. It was inexplicable, and what it did was seed the rest of the debate to be a real contest between Duc Ford and Andrea Horvath.
Huh. So I didn't really read it that way at all, but go ahead, Rob Silver, give me your take.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Chad was getting into some of that $1 beer a little bit early while watching that debate. There's nothing more boring in some ways than partisans coming after a debate and saying why their guy or their woman won.
Yes, and I don't want you to say that.
We're not the target. We're not the target audience. So I think that all three leaders did some good things. If you liked Duc Ford going into the debate, he did what you'd expect from Duc Ford. If you don't, I don't think so. Andrea Horvath had a weird performance. She was interrupting everybody all the time. And every debate training I have ever done, the one thing you tell the candidate is do not interrupt. People at home do not like when you're interrupting, and that's what she was doing. I'm biased. I thought Kathleen Wynne gave the performance of her life. Whether it matters, whether it moves numbers, she left it on the floor there. She both had a bunch of clips, and she also explained to people, as we talked about before the debate, why she's premier and why Liberals in particular should come back home to the party. Again, I have no idea if it moved numbers. I have no idea if it changes the election, but I think she gave the performance of her lifetime.
Okay, and Rob's clearly still having trouble with his audio, so we will get that fixed. Brad, what did you think? I actually thought everybody did pretty well, and I agree with Rob that sort of you got what you expected from everybody. If you liked them, you probably still like them after this, and I don't know that anyone came out heavily damaged in any way. What was your take?
I think that's a fair assessment, and for each of the three candidates had different needs for tonight. And if that is the case, that it's pretty much all a wash, then Andrea Horvath wins by default. Kathleen Wynne had to knock it out of the park and move those numbers. Now, the problem with tonight's debate and this sorry, not sorry issue that the Liberals are throwing out there as they're losing support is the problem is with the leader herself. If you look at the public domain polls leading into tonight's debate, her favorability ratings are in the basement. Her disapproval ratings are continue to soar. Her likability numbers are very bad. Then you ask the province to watch 90 minutes of her defending what she's done for the last handful of years. And at the end of the day, it's just not a recipe. It's the ingredients. It's not the cooks in the Liberal war room per se. They don't have much to work with. So this whole notion of sorry, not sorry is only, I think, going to inflame people's angers. Those that are unhappy or disappointed with Kathleen Wynne, her telling them that they're the problem, that they don't like her, is only going to further inflame them. But for the main event, which was Ford versus Horvath, did Duc Ford say enough about his campaign promises, his $6 billion of cuts? He made outrageous sentiments tonight, saying that everything is going to be so awesome that they're going to have to hire more nurses, when in fact his plan is to fire nurses. We're going to have to hire more teachers, that things are going to be great. He's actually going to fire nurses. So his performance tonight was weird.
Okay, we'll dig into some of those things a little bit more. I love that Rob sort of plays the role of Chantal Hébert's face on this panel. He gives it all away every time he's talking. I want to go to Eric, though, and get some of Eric's take there. Eric, what did you make of that first clip from Kathleen Wynne? That first sort of, I get you may not like me, but here are some of the things that I have tried to help you in your life with. I mean, there seems to be a lot of, both from Chad and Brad, that it wouldn't have worked. I don't know. I thought it was, I thought it made sense that that's sort of the last play here. But give me a sense of what you think it would do for someone whose leadership numbers are not very strong.
Well, I thought it was a interesting approach to take, and I don't think it was necessarily in some way very bad for her, or that it was, on the other hand, very good. We did see that recently they have an ad where they're saying that she can do better, and it's a little bit of a mea culpa, so you have a little bit of that there. But, when you've been in power for 15 years as a government, and she has been premier now for about 5 years, it's hard to say that I'm not proud of what my legacy is and what we've accomplished, because the whole point of the election for the Liberals is re-elect us so we can keep doing the great things that we've been doing. At least that would be their message. So to somehow go against it and say we'll change everything we've done over the last few years wouldn't make much sense. So I don't think it's necessarily a damaging approach for her. I think that she has to make that case, because she has to give people who might be inclined to vote Liberal, who maybe are on the fence and thinking about going to these other parties, that there is a reason to vote for this party because of the things we've done, and I'm the person who can continue to deliver the things that I've been able to do over the last few years.
Sort of a reminder of the legacy of the record. Okay, I'm going to put everybody on hold for just a moment, because still ahead we're going to hear from each of the leaders with reporters' questions, short scrums, but we'll take them live as they happen, and we'll dig into some more of the points of this debate. Is it important to have a plan, to publish a plan? Does that matter to voters? Lots of special coverage. The Ontario Leaders Debate still ahead on CBC News Network. Welcome back to our special post-debate coverage here on CBC News Network. Let's break down a little bit of what we've been listening to over the past hour and a half or so with the CBC Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley. Okay, Mike, I'm already getting text messages and tweets about who won, clearly from partisan people telling me that their person won. I don't know that we are at a time when you get a lot of knockout punches in debates, but what did you make of what we heard and whether it's likely to change anything in terms of where we're at in this election campaign?
Yeah, you know, Rosemary, I don't get a sense that this is going to move the needle in any way. And that's partly because I think each of the three leaders did the job that they set out to go and do. Andrea Horvath obviously was the subject of lots of attacks, but she was relatively composed. She was a little testier than I thought she was going to be, but you know, you could see her relatively relaxed. You know, came across fine. Duc Ford was on message, and the message is be afraid of the NDP. He got across his points fairly clearly, and there were no big mistakes by any of the leaders. Kathleen Wynne seemed looser. She seemed a little more relaxed. She probably wins the quip of the night when she reacted to Duc Ford saying a couple of times about government daycares closing at 4:30, and she says, "Have you ever been in a daycare?" So you know that was probably the moment that got the most reaction. But overall, they did what they needed to do, and now there's 11 days to go. Yeah, it's interesting because you didn't get, and I'll wrap it up in a second with you, but you don't get a lot of detailed answers from Duc Ford. I will say that. He sort of says broadly the things he's going to do, but particularly when he's asked about how he plans to grow the economy, whether jobs will be cut, he just says they won't, but doesn't explain the other part of that. So I wonder if you were considering him, whether that would be problematic for you. But I think for a lot of people who don't actually see how the sausage gets made in terms of watching news conferences like we do, they get to have learned how politicians don't answer the question, and it wasn't just Duc Ford that didn't do that. I mean, there was the beginning question about trust, where for a couple of times they didn't even mention the word trust. So. Duc Ford's lack of a plan is obviously a concern, and both Andrea Horvath and Kathleen Wynne tried to identify that. But Horvath and Wynne, I thought, fell short, and they had one opportunity when Duc Ford was asked about what are you going to do concretely about climate change, and neither of them really nailed the fact that he didn't say anything that he's going to do to tackle climate change. So, maybe that's a missed opportunity for them. Okay, Mike, I'll leave it there. We'll catch up with you a little bit later. Thank you, sir. Megan Fitzpatrick has been talking to people outside the broadcast center as they leave with some of their impressions of how things unfolded, actual people and voters. Megan, what have you been hearing there?
Well, just to pick up on what Mike was saying, Rosie, I just talked to the gentleman who asked that question about climate change to PC leader Duc Ford, and the question was whether he believes in global warming, and if so, what are his concrete proposals to do something to address it, if not a cap-and-trade program or a carbon tax, which obviously Duc Ford is against. And Duc Ford's answer to that was, again, to explain why he's against the carbon tax. But this gentleman who asked this question is telling me he was disappointed by Ford's answer because he didn't actually outline what steps he would take to address global warming. So he didn't hear enough substance from the PC leader in answering that question. And so he's telling me he was disappointed by the answer. So, and this is a voter who, not a loyal PC voter or Liberal or NDP, said he changes his vote from election to election. And at this point, he still remains an undecided voter. So what he heard in tonight's debate didn't move him one way or the other. So that was just one impression that I got from someone who was in the audience, a regular voter here in Ontario. And otherwise, a little bit of reaction from just a few more people as they came up. But that was an interesting one to pick up on what just exactly what Mike was saying.
Thanks, Megan. We'll come back to you, I promise. Kathleen Wynne, Andrea Horvath, and Duc Ford about to take questions from reporters. We'll bring you there live next. Welcome back to our special coverage, the final Ontario Leaders Debate. Look at that fascinating dynamic shot right there. We're waiting for the leaders to come out and take a couple of questions from reporters for about 5 minutes or so. Kathleen Wynne will be the first one up. Let's go back to Eric Grenier as we stand by, and we'll go to that scrum live. So I may cut you off, Eric, as you know I do, and you don't never mind when it happens. Let's talk a little bit about the lack of plan that Duc Ford was criticized for having. I'm not sure it's entirely fair, because certainly he's been announcing things, as the campaign goes on. Is it all written down in one website and added up? No. And I guess that would be disconcerting if you don't believe him when he says he doesn't plan to get rid of any jobs. From your perspective, though, does that kind of detail resonate with voters at this stage? Is that what they're... Oh, hang on, here's Wynne. So I'm sorry, you can answer that when we get back.
You've heard a lot from me tonight, so I will just ask if you have any questions.
Qu'est-ce que vous avez voulu dire par sorry, not sorry?
J'ai voulu dire que je connais qu'il y a des personnes en Ontario qui n'aiment pas moi, et je le sais, mais je suis aussi fière de notre record, de notre fondation, de notre Ontario, et j'ai voulu exprimer cette fierté.
To people that I was proud of what I had done, she says.
Ford for not having a platform, but of course the Auditor General told you that your own budget was off by about $6 billion in deficit. Is it really credible for you to be going after him on that?
Well, interestingly, both parties, as far as we know, have used, and now I don't know what Duc Ford's platform is, as I have said tonight, but both parties, as far as we know, are using exactly the same numbers that we have used to base our budget on. We have been very transparent about all of the numbers in our plan, and those are the numbers that the other parties are using.
The Auditor General said you were not being transparent. That's exactly what the Auditor General said.
There's an accounting disagreement. There is no doubt about that, but the numbers that we have used have been verified. They've been used by the other parties, and they are the foundation of both our plan and the NDP plan.
Premier, what did you have to convince?
I'll go here, and then I'll come to you.
We saw Andrea Horvath going at times after Duc Ford going after Andrea Horvath. The polls suggest the two could be tied for support. Are you afraid that you'll be forgotten between the two?
Look, I was very happy to have the opportunity tonight to talk about what we have done in this province, what our plan is going forward, and to make the point that on the one hand we've got Duc Ford, who has no plan at all, has no coherent plan, and the plan that the NDP has put forward is not a practical plan. They're tied by ideology, whereas what we are putting forward builds on the foundation that we've already built in this province. The economy's thriving. We've created jobs. There are really good indicators in Ontario, and we have a practical plan that takes us forward. And that distinction was one I wanted to make tonight.
Premier, are you trying to push the NDP further to the left and again try to occupy the center to woo voters? Is that your only way to get back in the game here?
So what I am doing is describing what is happening. So the fact is that the NDP have put forward a plan that in many ways is tied to an ideology that does not allow them to find the fairest, most practical solution. Our plan and the way we have governed has been about looking at all of the options when we are solving problems and finding the fairest, most practical solution. And that's exactly what we've done. And it has meant that we're in a province now where the economy's thriving, where we've got businesses coming and jobs being created. So I'm simply stating what the difference is between what the NDP is putting forward and what we are putting forward.
Premier, why do you think that voters will vote for you if you openly acknowledge they don't like you?
Well, voters will make that decision. I was simply stating what I know to be the case, But I also was stating my pride in and my understanding of how well Ontario is doing. And so obviously the debate tonight was about giving the people of Ontario an opportunity to get to know us all a little bit better, but most importantly, to understand more clearly what it is we are offering, what it is we're capable of, how we are going to solve the problems that people are confronting, and whether we have a practical way of doing that, whether we have a realistic way of doing that. And that's what I was talking about tonight.
Why can't you answer that? Why can't you answer that? You seem to be unable to answer why voters would vote for you if you say they don't like you.
Well,
why is that for voters to decide?
I'm not sure what, I'm not, everyone will make their own decision about whether liking the leader is the deciding factor. And that is, that's an individual decision for each person in the province. Mike, did you have a question? Okay.
Sorry, I heard much call it last question. So all of a sudden you are talking about the NDP being beholden to the unions, which some people might think is kind of a bit rich coming from your party. Further to what Sean's getting, after so many years of trying to out-left the NDP, are you shifting last minute here? Is this a shift to the centre?
So Andrea Horvath and the NDP have made a very specific statement that they will never support back-to-work legislation. And the point I was making tonight is that that is a rigid ideological position that does not allow for government to have a tool that when the collective bargaining process has broken down, when every step in the collective bargaining process has been explored and has failed, that what they're saying is that they will remove that tool that government has to act in the public interest. So the garbage will pile up if there's a garbage strike, the transit will not run if there's a transit strike, the students will not go back to school if there's an education strike. And what I'm saying is that that is not in the best interests of the public in this province. And I am making a distinction. I'm a Liberal because I believe that finding practical, realistic solutions is what government is elected to do. That's actually our job, is to weigh all the options and find the practical solution. And what the NDP has put forward in terms of this specific issue, the back-to-work legislation, is neither practical nor in the public interest. Okay.
Very unpopular. Why are you using your biggest platform of this campaign to talk about something that most people don't necessarily agree with?
I understand that back-to-work legislation can be a very contentious issue, and I'm a big supporter of unions, of federations, of the collective bargaining process. And, I have worked very, very hard on those relationships. But there comes a point sometimes in the collective bargaining process where an impasse is reached, where there is no solution, there is no way to bring the sides together. That's exactly what had happened in the York strike. We had taken every step. We had taken an unusual step of appointing a commissioner to give us advice and to try to get a solution. There is no solution. And when the NDP blocked that legislation that would have gotten students back into school, that's where we part ways. That is, to me, that is not acting in the public interest, and it's an ideological position that's not practical. Okay, thanks. Thanks, everyone. Merci.
Okay, this is going to clip along pretty quickly here. They've only got about 5 minutes or so, and there's only about 5 minutes between each scrum. Eric, what did you make of that exchange there and the suggestion by reporters? I think it's probably an accurate one, that there is an attempt to make the NDP maybe look more radical than they are.
Well, that's the goal for the Liberals here, is to say that, fine, we might agree on a lot of different issues, but the NDP is not the Liberals, that we are the more pragmatic centrist party, and the New Democrats are further to the left. So are you really willing to lend your vote over to Andrea Horvath because you don't like me personally? Right. So that'll be the message that the Liberals will be trying to make for the next 10 days or so until the election, because they do need to get some of those voters back, those who are now drifting over to the Democrats, because they might be more afraid of Duc Ford. But if Kathleen Wynne can make the case that Andrea Horvath is also a change you might not be willing to accept, then she might be able to get some of those people back towards her. But the momentum in this campaign is working against the Liberals and towards the NDP, and it's not clear to me that the debate had any impact on changing at least the lines of those of that momentum.
Right, and we're standing by for Andrea Horvath, so I'll go to Brad, but I may cut you off, Brad. I mean, we did expect Andrea Horvath to be the target of much of the debate, but I did find it interesting the way the Liberals went after her for suggesting that back-to-work legislation would not be on the table for an NDP government. And then, of course, Duc Ford saying all sorts of scary things about the economy and what could potentially happen to the economy under an NDP government.
Yeah. I think the attacks were predicted. I think New Democrats knew that Andrea was going to be the focus of both Wynne and Ford's attention tonight. They were. And I think that the question you pose is the central one. That is, did any of it land significantly enough to change the trajectory? And I have to say no. I mean, there was no clear hits there. The hits that came out of Duc Ford were he was flailing and talking about things that I don't think most of the folks at home would truly follow or understand because they were so outrageous that there's going to be doom and gloom. I don't think that people are going to be taken in by that. So, she handled the attacks, very, very well. I was very impressed with her ability to kind of, take the punch, but also land a whole bunch, particularly on the issue of trust. She had a good, solid hit on both Ford and Wynne in that section on trust, and I think that ultimately this election campaign is going to be about that more so than labor law.
Yeah, it's curious, though, Rob, I'll bring you in here while we await the next mic. It's curious to me that the issue, the mistake in the budgeting, which Duc Ford tried to make some hay out of, but kept bringing up this number that wasn't accurate. So I don't know how much that resonated. But it's curious to me that wasn't a bigger issue, either for the Liberals or the Conservatives, and that Andrea Horvath didn't have to explain more this accounting mistake that they made that put them out, I think it's $1.4 billion. Oh, wait, here's Andrea Horvath, so hold on, I'll come back to you first. Hang on.
Despite the neck-and-neck polls regarding you and the PCs, they seem to have a lot better vote efficiency, vote distribution, such that they're confident they don't even have to campaign as much in the GTA or heading out to southwestern Ontario yet again. How are you going to not just get ahead in the polls, but get votes where they matter in the vote-rich GTA? You're going to be campaigning around here for the next week, for example?
I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, which is reaching out to Ontarians across the province to show them that life doesn't have to be the way it is. They don't have to go from bad to worse, from Kathleen Wynne to Duc Ford, and they can have a premier in this province who will put them, everyday people, at the heart of every decision we make. And, that's what our campaign's been about. It's about hope for the future, about saying that there is somebody that can help to make life better.
You did a lot of interrupting tonight. A lot of interrupting. Was that a plan of yours going in? You wanted to get in there and jab around?
I went into this debate wanting to ensure that people knew what we stood for, what it was that we believe we can do to make life better, how we can fix our healthcare system, how we can make sure young people have opportunity for the future, how young families will be able to afford childcare and a roof over their head. I went wanting to this debate, wanting to, to do what I did, which is to stay focused on everyday people.
But I'm just wondering if you actually came across maybe not as premier-like as you're trying to convince people that you are.
Again, I believe that I achieved what I came to achieve, which is to always bring the debate back to and remind people that it shouldn't be about about any of the three of us. It should always be about the people of Ontario, and that's what this election's about. It's about what kind of future are we going to have in our province. What kind of choice are people going to make in terms of the future? And what we saw, I think, is a person who's not prepared to show people what his plan is. I mean, Mr. Ford went through a 90-minute debate, and we still don't have a platform. I mean, that is so disrespectful for the people who are already at the polls. I mean, yesterday and today, the advance voting started, and people don't have a sense of what Mr. Platform That's a good slip, right? What Mr. Ford's platform is all about. And so if I was a little bit frustrated in that regard, I think it reflects the frustration that people have. He talks a good game, but I think tonight showed that Mr. Ford's pretty out of touch with what everyday families are struggling with.
Ms. Horvath, he brought up again some of your candidates, calling them radical. He said one of them has been inspired by Hitler. Obviously, they're using this as a strategy. They're scouring the social media accounts of all your candidates. How much of a distraction is that to your campaign? Is it throwing you off message?
Yeah, well, you know, he's trying his hardest to dig up Facebook posts and pieces that go back years and years, and I think what people need to get a sense of is what's happening today, right now, with Mr. Ford and his candidates. I mean, there are 3 different police forces that are investigating different candidates of Mr. Ford's who may be using stolen information from the 407. I mean, this is identity theft happening here, and yet somehow Mr. Ford thinks that this is not anything that he needs to be responsible for, or that he needs to answer to, and instead he's digging back into years of Facebook posts, posts of my candidates. At the end of the day, what Mr. Ford needs to do is come clean about what's happening with that data that was stolen from the 407, come clean about what he intends to do with his $6 billion of cuts and likely more, show the people a platform. I mean, look, this is a guy who's a businessman. I mean, there's no way that Mr. Ford is going to sign a contract without the numbers filled in. There's no way that a guy like Mr. Ford would buy a used car and not look under the hood, and yet that's exactly what he's asking Ontarians to do.
Duc Ford fired Tanya Granick-Allen as a candidate over something that was on YouTube from several years ago. Mm-hmm. What's it going to take for you to actually fire a candidate? What's it going to take?
Well, again, I believe very firmly that every time they've decided to use this tabloid mudslinging tactic, we've responded very clearly in terms of our candidates and their commitment to the values and the program that's set out in our platform. And I'm going to continue to do that. Again, if Mr. Ford's tactics or his plan for the next 11 days is to not give people a platform to look at and instead just try to mudsling, I've got some news for Mr. Ford. People who throw mud, who sling mud, often lose ground.
What is your bar, though? To Mike's question, what is your bar for getting rid of a candidate? Because you set the bar for other parties. You set the bar on Tanya Granick-Allen and on Patrick Brown that they should be booted. So what does it take for you to boot a candidate?
I'm not going to I'm not going to project what might or might not happen in the course of the next 11 days. What I'm going to do is what I've done for the last number of days, a number of weeks, even prior to the campaign starting. And that is to let the people of Ontario know that there is a party that's going to stay focused on them, that's not going to spend all my time slinging mud and dragging people down into the dirt, and instead focus on the positive and the fact that we can have hope for the future. That's what I think people deserve. And all of this muckraking that's going on, I think, is what makes people cynical about politics and what makes people want to give up on even voting. And you know what? I think that this time we can do things differently and have people vote for something, for a change.
Duc Ford is coming in 2 minutes. We have time to come.
Andrea, it's down to the wire. How do you get people who typically vote Liberal onto your side?
Well, again, I think that folks for a long time have been saying that they are disappointed with Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals. The choice really is between Mr. Ford, who has no platform, who says he's for the people, but whose plan is really for the rich, and who's insulting folks by not even putting a platform out there for them to look at before voting. Whereas our plan is out. It has been out for some time now, and it's all about making life better for families. Thanks very much, everyone.
Okay, that was the NDP leader, Andrea Horvath. 2 down, 1 to go. Duc Ford expected out to scrum just shortly. I cut off Rob Silver, so I'll go to him first, and you can go anywhere you want. That's the gift I give you for cutting you off.
I think there were three challenges for Ms. Horvath tonight. First, which I discussed earlier, was stylistic. You don't get to be the happy, fun person, the positive light in an election, which she's played very well to this point, when you're constantly interrupting, when you're heckling people, basically, as they're trying to make a point. So stylistically, I think she had it was just off-brand, and it was off-putting. Number two, I do think that Kathleen Wynne did a very good job differentiating the Liberals, which is, let's be honest, Kathleen Wynne has run a very progressive, very left-of-center type of government in many ways, and there's a lot of similarities between her government and what an NDP government might look like. But on the back-to-work legislation, that's just a tough position to defend. Unless you really are ideological, Horvath didn't do a great job defending it. She threw out there that it's unconstitutional, which just isn't true. Then also on daycare, Andrea Horvath's opposition to any form of private daycare, it's a tough position to defend. So that I thought was very effective. And finally, while Mr. Ford's attacks were hyperbolic, over the top in terms of, the province will come to an end if there's an NDP government, I think there is a swath of the electorate, especially in the 905, that if the NDP are going to form government, they desperately need to be winning those seats. That kind of doubt may prove effective for Mr. Ford, for the Liberals, however those votes ultimately distribute. The NDP have never won an election in Ontario, federal or provincial, when people were casting a vote with their mind turned towards this is a vote for a government, not a vote just for a local member or a protest type vote. We don't know. That doesn't mean they can't win this time, but we've never seen them be successful in doing so. In 2011, Stephen Harper, to a large extent, won his majority because of fear in those 905 ridings of Jack Layton forming government. Different election, different candidates.
Sure.
No idea how it plays out, but I think that is part of the strategy here. Obviously.
Sure, except what I think we're leaving out is that many people might see this as a protest vote. They might see, I don't want Kathleen Wynne, I don't want Duc Ford as a protest vote.
That's why I think you saw both Duc Ford and Kathleen Wynne repeating over and over and over again the prospect of an NDP government. It's unusual, typically in a political debate, to acknowledge the other guys may be winning. Both of those candidates were doing that over and over and over again. It was very deliberate, I think, that both of them were acknowledging this not hypothetical, real possibility.
Maybe this is naive of me, and Chad,
you
can
never.
jump in and correct me.
Impossible.
But doesn't the fact, though, that there is BC that's governed by an NDP premier and Alberta governed by an NDP premier, haven't we walked away a little bit from that discomfort? And I realize it's a different province and there's different things. Oh, okay, hang on. Here's Duc Ford. So you're on pause now. You get to go first after.
Tags to the United States if Andrea Horvath wins the election?
Well, you know something, we're going to win the election because we have a great plan. We have a great plan for the people, how we're going to reduce taxes, put money back into their pocket instead of the government's pocket. We're going to reduce the gas tax by 10 cents a liter. We're going to reduce your personal income tax by 20%, putting more money into your pocket. We're going to reduce, the number one issue when I travel around the province is hydro rates. Number one issue with people, number one issue with companies. We're going to reduce the hydro rates by 12%, and we're going to make this province thrive. We're going to make it prosperous again. We're going to give everyone opportunity to grow, small companies to grow into larger companies. That's what our plan is going to be. We're going to fix the hallway health care. We're going to reduce and eliminate hallway health care. We're going to introduce 30,000 new long-term care beds. We're going to make sure that we take care of seniors with dental care. Over 100,000 seniors that need dental care. We're going to take care of that. We're going to put $1.9 billion into addiction.
Why don't you want to answer the question? Why don't you want to answer the question? So the NDP wins, you keep deco labels here, or do you move it to the States?
Well, again, my friends, I'm focused on winning this election because when we...
You're not answering the question.
You're asking me a hypothetical question.
But you created the hypothetical
question. I can tell you, my friend...
The NDP won. Therefore, it's not a hypothetical
actually,
question.
you know something, my friends? I'm just...
setting up.
I'll answer a question this way. When I crisscross Ontario, and I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of businesses, they are terrified, absolutely terrified the NDP will come in. And you know something, you look back when they were back in power, they lost 125,000 jobs in less than 4 years. Unemployment skyrocketed up 28% higher. Welfare rates went up. under an NDP government, we'd be paying a fortune for gas, $2 a liter.
You keep using this number of $1.1 billion. You keep saying you saved the city of Toronto $1.1 billion. The reality is that's not true. Spending went up under your brother's administration. In that figure is a tax cut that actually cost the city money. In that figure, there were layoffs from CBC and elsewhere. So why do you keep saying it? It's not true.
Do you know what's funny, my friend? You weren't on budget, I was. Mike Delgrand was the budget chief, best budget chief ever. And when I tell Mike Delgrand we only saved $1 billion, I get a phone call from him all the time saying, Doug, you're wrong. It wasn't $1 billion. It was $1,160 million. And even the people might not see eye to eye with us. The Toronto Star said, no, it wasn't $1 billion. It was $700 million. Okay, we saved 700 according to them. That's fine. Anyways, my friends, we're the only ones with a proven track record that did what they said we were going to do, and that is save the taxpayers' money, put money back in the taxpayers' pocket. And guess what? Not one single person got laid off, and I'm giving you my word, not one single person is going to lose a job. To the contrary, when the economy gets going, I want to hire more nurses. I want to hire more doctors. I want to hire more teachers. So don't let these, don't let the NDP, they're very untruthful, by the way. They're terribly untruthful when they say you're going to lay people off. It's just not being truthful.
Mr. Ford, what's your climate change policy? Mr. Ford,
have you ever been in a daycare?
How do you put money back into the taxpayer's pocket without sacrificing services, infrastructure? How do you plan
I love
on
that
doing
question.
But how do you plan on doing
I
that?
love that question. So when thank you, that's the best question going. So anyways, how am I going to save the taxpayers' money? I'll tell you how. We're going to reach out, just like we did at the City of Toronto. The frontline workers are itching to give you advice. They're itching to tell you where waste is because guess what? They're being ignored. They're being ignored by their supervisors. They're being ignored by the ministry and the upper management. And our phone's been ringing. When I go out there and I meet the frontline workers, they said there's endless savings. Number one. Number two, when the Auditor General, which I have a great deal of respect to the Auditor General, by the way, when the Auditor General came out and said, we will find $1 billion. She actually showed us where the $1 billion is, and no one gets laid off. Number three, we're going to bring in an outside auditing firm to help out the Auditor General to drive efficiencies throughout the system. There's no one in Ontario, and I've talked to thousands. Matter of fact, out of all the candidates, no one's went to more rallies, more events than I have, not even close combined. And when I talk to these people and talk to businesses, and I tell them, do you think there's 4% waste in the government of Ontario? They break out laughing. Only 4%? We're being modest. We'll find the efficiencies. We're going to put more money back in your pocket. And guess what? When the economy is booming, we will hire more people, more nurses, more doctors.
Mr. Ford, what's your climate policy? Mr. Ford, what's your climate policy?
You don't trust politicians yourself. So let's talk about trust. The Liberals have accused you of buying bogus memberships, and then there's that 407 scandal. So what do you say about trust?
Well, you know something I've always said, and I've said this for years. I don't see it eye to eye with politicians. But if you want to look at the radical activists that the NDP have, and I love how Andrea Horvath wouldn't admit that one of her candidates had inspiration through Adolf Hitler. Another candidate spent their whole career in shutting down mines, one of their all-star candidates, shutting down mines and celebrating when they closed the forestry or closing mines. Another radical activist ran around celebrating and saying, our veterans, which is disgusting, our veterans, our military folks, are war criminals. Who says that? Anyone ever on my team ever called a veteran or one of our military folks a war veteran? They're done. But most importantly, my friends, this is the most important thing. So when the Toronto Star, and I give you credit, by the way, Toronto Star, let me repeat that. Duc Ford's given Toronto Star the credit. So when they asked Andrea, kind of in terms of, you kind of have a weak bench, her answer was, I will send them to training school. Well, let me tell you something, my friends. We have all-stars on our team. We can form government tomorrow. My biggest challenge, we have so many great people, it's going to be hard to pick which ones are going to be in cabinet. But I can't wait till June the 7th. We're going to save you money. We're going to put money back into your pocket instead of the government's pocket. I want to thank you for coming and watching tonight, and I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you.
All right, and that is the PC leader, Duc Ford. He does know how to really take over that microphone. I'll give him that. Chad, again, I cut you off, so you hit me with your best shot there.
I think Doug had a better scrum than debate even. Look, Ford and Horvath tonight really made an effort to speak to the audience at home and not get into policy jargon. They made an effort to lay out their very different cases in terms of personal benefit. If you are what the political scientists call a lower information voter who's watching tonight, I think you heard very different cases from those two leaders. And I liked the debate. I mean, I'm walking away saying this was good for civic health in Ontario because you had candidates with totally different proposals who didn't really get into that much ad hominem or treat each other with that much disrespect. So I think a real driver of choice. I think for Duc Ford, he walks away tonight as the rookie amongst the three, having done pretty well. I think this performance was better than the last one. And he spoke to the folks at home who are in his target wheelhouse or not. I think Andrea Horvath put her elbows up, and the question is, by being combative as opposed to outlining her plan, did she do what she needed to do? I don't know, but the next few days are gonna tell us. I think Premier Wynne, essentially, this debate sunsets her participation in the rest of the campaign, and it now becomes really the PC-NDP race, which is a first ever in Ontario.
I will give you this. I do think the debate was good for people watching. Whether you had your mind made up or not, I think it gave you a good sense of what you would get with each government. Okay, I'm going to put you all on pause. I'm going to come back. You'll have lots more time. Mike Crawley, we're going to go to him now. He is in the room where those scrums were happening. Mike, a final thought from you on that debate. Certainly, you and I both agree that this hasn't radically changed things. But if the NDP has momentum, wants to try and hold momentum, is there any sign that they feel that, or are they telling you that they feel that they did that tonight? Is anyone telling you sort of where they think they've landed now?
Yeah, so the key thing for the NDP is how voters are going to react to the way Andrea Horvath came across tonight. Were they okay with the fact that she was interrupting people, that she was a bit, as I'd said earlier, feisty? Key thing from Duc Ford was the focus on his candidates. I noticed that tomorrow morning he's going to be having an event out in Newmarket that he's titled Ready to Govern, and it's basically a round table with all their candidates. And you noticed his frequent contrasting of his team with Andrea Horvath's team. So I think the PCs are getting a message that voters are interested in the ability of someone to form a cabinet, and Duc Ford is confident in his team, and potentially there are some weaknesses on Andrea Horvath's side.
Okay, but everybody goes to training school. I should point out, when the Liberals formed government here in Ottawa, everybody went off to training school as well. So yeah, that is true. That is an actual thing that happens. Mike Crawley, thank you for your coverage as always. We'll talk again soon. Let's go to Eric Grenier for one last thought from him. Eric will join me on the National in about 9 minutes' time, so he's going to go off and prepare in a moment. But leave us with where you think we are at after that, Eric.
Yeah, well, if you were an undecided voter, I agree with Mike and you that you got a very good contrast between the three leaders in terms of what they would do. You had Kathleen Wynne, who was talking about her policies and her legacy as leader for the last few years. Andrea Horvath trying to make the case that Duc Ford could not be trusted to be the change agent, and that it's not worth going back to Kathleen Wynne. And Duc Ford very clearly pivoting to going after the New Democrats, which is a change, because at the beginning of the campaign, that was not what was going on. And the problem for Duc Ford, though, is that this was about halting the NDP's momentum. And his message has not really evolved from the beginning of the campaign, when he was focused on being the change candidate, on going after the Liberals. It's not clear whether he will be able to stop that NDP momentum, or that Andrea Horvath did anything to put a halt to it either herself.
Okay, Eric Grenier, thank you. As always, I always feel safe when I'm with you here. You'll join me on the National in a few moments' time. Thank you, sir. Let's go back to the panel for one last thought for everybody. I've got 3 minutes, so you each get one. For real. Brad, you start us off. Where do you think we go from here now in the last 11 days? What has to happen for us to get a little more clarity about who might win, and what voters need to know, I guess, in the last week or so?
I think you're going to see Andrea Horvath and Duc Ford fight it out and almost ignore the Liberals. As Chad says, I think she did not do what she needed to do, Kathleen Wynne, tonight. She needed to have such a knockout blow that people changed their fundamental opinion about her, and nobody is suggesting that happened tonight. So it's going to be Ford versus Horvath over the next 10 days. Horvath is going to continue to punch Ford and ask him for his platform. I even hear that she may be going into Etobicoke, into Ford territory in the next day or so. So look for the knives to sharpen up. Horvath's focus is clearly going to be on Duc Ford, asking the ballot question, who do you want for Premier? Who do you want to lead Ontario over the next 4 years? Andrea Horvath or Duc Ford? Those are the choices. Choose your Ontario.
Rob Silver, what do you think?
I think Kathleen Wynne had, as I said, the performance of her life. She'll be able to sleep very well, however voters at home took that performance. She can sleep well tonight. She left it all on the stage. It'll be interesting. This is an unprecedented electoral environment in Ontario. So anybody who says they know exactly how this is going to play out is drinking too much of that $1 beer.
I would agree with that too. Chad, last thought to you.
I think that if you go back to 1980 and the Ronald Reagan election against Jimmy Carter, Kathleen Wynne is really the Jimmy Carter of this race. She bought into the malaise and defended it, where Duc Ford's plan is to say, I'm excited about kickstarting the Ontario economy and I'm the only one talking about it. And that contrast is going to widen a gulf between he and Andrea Horvath as the next 10 days go forward, where she talks about building up government and building up the state and building up services. And he says what we've got to do is really kick the economy in the pants and get Ontario going and growing again. And that's going to be really what drives people to a different ballot question by June the 7th.
Okay, well, I will agree with this, with what Rob said. I don't think anyone expected we'd be where we are now with 11 days left. So who knows what will happen once that time is up. Rob Silver, Chad Rogers, Brett Living, thank you all, gentlemen. I appreciate your expertise. Thanks for coming in on Sunday night. That's it for this gang on CBC News Network. The National is next with more debate coverage, the rest of the news you need to know today, so I guess I'll be there too. A reminder, you can get all your Ontario election coverage on our website, CBCNews.ca. You can check out Eric's poll tracker at any time, and it's been crazy to watch, so go check that out. And join us on June 7th. That's Election Day. It's just a little more than a week away now. We will bring you special results coverage throughout the night. Myself, Dwight Drummond, Eric Renier, we will all be there as Ontario prepares for what will be a heck of an election. Whether it unfolds the way these fellas think it will or not, it's going to be an exciting night, June 7th, so make sure you join us then. The National starts in just a moment.